Chapter 296. Wasted on you. Mama. The little girl called out, looking up at her mother as they stood in the long food line. Her eyes fell on her mother's wrist, purple splotches peeking from under her sleeve. The little girl took a few deep breaths, shifting uncomfortably underneath her wool cloak. The incoming winter had demanded heavier clothes, but the girl was feeling its weight more than usual. Regaining her breath, she called out again, louder. Mama. What? What is it, dear? The mother finally looked back, her own breath laborious. Her face was worn despite her young age, more discoloration showing near her neck. The girl looked down, pulling up her sleeve and exposing some black spots around her elbow. Her face mirrored her nervousness, her eyes keeping away from her mother's. This morning, I dash. It's okay, dear. The mother quickly pulled the girl's sleeve back down, giving her a hug. Stay warm. We almost have our food, and then we can go back to our house. Yes, Mama. The girl just nodded, the two waiting in line a bit longer before suddenly turning their heads. A short distance away was a commotion. They recognized the sight of the town guards, a once welcome sight, now feared with the outbreak of disease. Now there were dozens of them marching through the streets, weapons drawn and citizens running. The little girl hugged her mother. Mama, it's going to be okay. The mother continued hugging her child, seeing a group of guards marching toward them. The mother's breathing quickened, adrenaline shooting through her body and yet only making her weaker. She was still in the early stages of disease, still on the upturn of weakness, but not weak enough to be bedridden like her husband. Still, moments like these hit her the hardest, her legs and arms becoming soft despite her demands to move. Those nearby started to cluster in fright, the guards shouting, "Start moving. Everyone who is infected, get to the other side of the town, right now." But we're still getting our food. One of the men stepped out and called back, earning a backhand that sent him to the floor. The soldier that hit him pointed his sword at the others. This is an order, not a request. Marquis Verx has passed down the decree to prepare for quarantine and isolation. All infected are considered a lost cause and must be corralled where they can't infect the healthy. So start moving or defy orders and give us a reason to simply move your corpse instead. Everyone started to scramble. Infected or not, there was little room to reason that didn't risk being met with the end of a blade. The mother grabbed her daughter and started running as fast as they could. See, come on, dear. The little girl, looking back at the guards as they marched forward. Then she looked back at her mother, seeing her labored breathing after just several seconds. Like many others with the disease, they all felt their weakness overtake them after passing just a few buildings. Some started slowing down and falling, their legs too weak to carry their own weight. The guards moved forward anyway. Get up and move. You diseased are lucky to be alive. How far do you think you can push that luck? Do you think my promises are a joke? The mother kept trudging forward, some of those who fell crying out as the guards shoved, then kicked, then sliced. The little girl noticed her mother slowing significantly, barely walking after some time. Then she suddenly tripped, the little girl dropping with her and feeling the fear of the oncoming guards. Even if they wanted to resist, all the guards had authority, powers beyond them, the ordinary people. There was no possible way for them to even wound them, especially behind that armor. The lead guard set his eyes on them, a badge on his chest displaying 4 chevrons, the sign of an authority for magus. He wasn't quite on the level of the guard captain, who was authority 5, but he was still capable of raising the entire town by himself. The citizens knew that well. The little girl started crying, shaking her mother. Mama, get up. Keep going, Nina. The mother tried pushing her daughter forward, failing. Nina, run. Mama, the little girl yelled, looking back up at the guards approaching. The lead guard stepped forward, Nina screaming as she was suddenly grabbed. The guard lifted her arm, exposing the black splotches under her sleeves. He clenched his sword, scoffing. Filthy infected. All of you are just carriers of disease. We should slaughter you all and be done with this disease. If ordinary people simply living threatens magi, then all of you should be put down. Nina. The mother called, crawling to the guard and Nina. After some seconds of silence, though, she looked up, confused. Everyone was frozen, the mother turning. Next to the lead guard was a tall man, almost 2 feet taller than him. He was dressed in metal armor of unrecognizable design, his mask faceless besides 2 glass eyes that glowed green. He simply stared at the guard, who stood there, unable to turn his head. His voice only came out after several moments. Let go of her. His words seemed to carry tangible power, the guard obeying and opening his grip. The girl dropped, moving to clutch her mother on the floor. They both looked back up, the mysterious man still staring at the guard. More seconds passed, and blood started to stream down the guard's helmet. It started as a trickle, before becoming a steady stream that dyed his armor red. Then, only when the guard's chest plate was covered and smelling of iron, he suddenly collapsed to the floor, unmoving. The mother stared, eyes filled with horror as she tried to pull her daughter away from the huge, armored man. He looked back at her, green glass eyes making her freeze with fear. His words came from the mask, their inhuman sound carving the experience into everyone's mind. Do not be afraid, towngoers. We are Iron Legion, and we're here to help. There is little I can do to prepare you beyond how your aura already has. Zirian's voice vibrated the study, Amara standing before the massive metal grimoire. After recovering for a handful of days, she had finally returned after Zirian announced the Weaver's readiness. The featureless metal cover of the huge book was no more. Instead, what lay upon its cover was an impossible complexity that barred all senses and comprehension. It was the ultimate cover a book could have, protecting its contents from eyes that didn't deserve. Amara turned her eyes to Zirian, the massive dragon looking a bit more serious than usual. What you are about to see, my pupil, is what's known as the conceptual. It is what you would naturally acquire access to upon breaking the Great Barrier. There is another world that all behind the barrier are wholly unaware of. This is but a glimpse at that world, and unfortunately, your gaze upon the information contained within the Weaver will not come without burden. It will show you what lies beyond the limits of your spatial magic. It will make you understand what you see, the little that you do. Just like anarchy. Just like anarchy. Zirian responded in acknowledgement, Amara staring at the grimoire. Who made this? My master, may his soul find rest. He imbued his knowledge of the conceptual into the Weaver, composing a tapestry of the threads of reality. One of the most powerful dragons to ever roam the firmament, one of the true ancient paragons, he held dominion over the threads between dimensions. The Weaver is just one of the many grimoires he created, yet he is among the most powerful, and one of the few that weren't destroyed in the Great Wars. I have an incredible amount of questions, and I know my fiancé would have dozens of times more. Amara sighed, making Zirian chuckle in amusement. My knowledge of that time is vast. I could spend ages speaking to you about the history I know, but we have not the time. Awake, Weaver! Zirian shouted, his roar shaking the study and spurring the Weaver to wakefulness. The grimoire trembled. Zirian, I am prepared, as am I. We will begin now. There is no need to delay. Zirian's head retracted from the roof of the study. Then his claw appeared, hovering over the opening before a fissure in space manifested over his palm. Amara heard a terrible screech as the fissure split open Zirian's scales and cut into his flesh. What came from the wound was not red blood, but a golden conglomeration of pure magicka. The golden essence fell from his palm. The Weaver shot toward it greedily, the essence hitting its metal cover and being absorbed without a second thought or reaction. Finally, the book turned toward Amara, the covers opening and its pages flipping in such a way that made them seem infinite. Its words shook Amara's soul. You are not ready. This is wasted on you. I hope that you will be capable enough to acquire even a modicum of power from gazing upon the conceptual. If it doesn't melt your mind first, I didn't ask for your bullshit. Hurry up and show me what makes you valuable. As you wish. The pages stopped turning and Amara's vision blanked. Everything around her turned to darkness, her consciousness suspended from her body and floating within a new plane. She sensed everything around her, finding exactly nothing. That was, until a point of light made itself known. Amara became wholly aware of it when it manifested, but because it was just one point, a one-dimensional point in reality, she felt no burden from it. Until that point suddenly bridged dimensions, turning into a string and spindling itself through the space around her. The burden multiplied, enough for Amara to notice, still not enough to give her burden. Then the string flattened into a plane. 2 dimensions, the burden increasing in magnitude accordingly. Then it exploded into a 3-dimensional cube, expanding endlessly around her. Now she finally felt a noticeable burden on her mind, similar to when she was casting magic and absorbing information about the world around her. It looked like a grid, the space around her being codified. She could finally see how the gravity of her body pulled in the grid around her, warped by her form, shifting with time. After that, though, the space suddenly exploded once more. Her mind nearly blanked, another dimension being added, turning infinite, unable to be seen with her eyes or comprehended with her senses. The fourth dimension turned every instant of the grid into an entirely new grid space. It was an infinity layered upon the universe, and by itself, if offered infinite possibilities. Within that higher dimension, space twisted, punctured, and warped across the three-dimensional plane endlessly and without limit. It allowed one to go around the third dimension, vanishing from one point and appearing in another. More than that, it could take any amount of time. It could be an instant transportation, or it could be an infinitely long transportation. The deviation from the normal timeline depended on the degree of warping. For things like teleportation, the degree was extremely small, causing little to no deviation from the normal timeline. Paradoxically, that also meant that teleportations were usually instantaneous from the perspective of the third dimension. Amara was overwhelmed by the layers of dimensions around her because it wasn't simply a matter of multiplying the planes. They all had their roots in each other. The dots and strings that reached across dimensions filled her mind with their information, but mere fractions were absorbed. Seeking to protect itself from the influx of higher forms of information, Amara's mind only took from what it already knew. Only information that lacked complete uniqueness relative to what was already within her mind and comprehensions remained. It only got worse when the fourth dimension rose into the fifth, and then the sixth. Every infinitude that ingrained itself into her mind left behind wounds that transformed into scars when the next dimension manifested. Amara wasn't able to keep track of it after the sixth, her consciousness overwhelmed wholly, still trying to make sense of itself. After that, time simply passed despite time itself becoming an abstraction, a mere suggestion instead of a law at some point up the dimensions. Then, everything came crashing back down, collapsing back into that singular point. Amara regained her own consciousness, and then she was kicked out. Her senses returned to her body. Her mind operated as if nothing happened, but the scars upon her comprehensions remained and tried to overwhelm her. She fell to the floor and vomited, coughing while attempting to feel anything. Despite her senses working, she couldn't make sense of them. She could see, yet she had no vision. She could feel, but there was no touch upon her skin. Her aura flared, completely uncontrolled. It morphed every which way, attempting to map every point of information across the dimensions around her, mimicking the knowledge infused into her forcefully, and failing miserably. Reality held far more than she could ever take for herself. And yet she kept trying, kept retracing the information without end, like an addiction hardwired into the brain, an instinct engraved into DNA. Her body could do nothing but groan, a mess on the floor, unable to even pass out. Zirian looked down at her, nodding. It worked. Better than expected. Just better than it did for you. She is talented, and most importantly, she seeks solace for my master's soul. She will use these tools toward that end. You gave her the spells, right? I don't break promises. You paid the price. She reaped the rewards she could, and all else was wasted. She didn't deserve it. Oh, but she did. Zirian chuckled, mana pouring forth and wrapping around the weaver. Go back. Someday, you may become hers. I am of nobody except my paragon. Just as with you. The weaver went silent, disappearing from the room. Zirian watched Amara continue to tremble on the floor, remaining silent, but ever observant. Chapter 297, Quiet Retribution. November 9th, 628. Amara coughed and slowly opened her eyes, dizziness lingering for some time before her mind cleared. She looked around and struggled to her knees, seeing Zirian's massive head still pointed at her. Her vision flashed with multidimensional grid space, her eyelids shutting in an attempt to wash the sights away and concentrate. When she opened them again, she continued to see sprays of arrays and formations, like spots and stars that blinked in the windows of her distractions. It came as a reflex. The slightest hint of her desire to know anything about the space in front of her would spawn dense strings, lines, and runes detailing the dimensions and spatial properties of the slice of reality before her. It was like a portion of her mind had been carved out strictly for that purpose. She turned her head, seeing one of her devices sitting on a table some distance away. Then she reached out, her hand twisting space and creating a tunnel, allowing her to directly grab the device and pull it from the channel. It collapsed, her eyes glossing over it for a few seconds before her grasp failed. The device fell to the floor, her breathing becoming a bit more labored. I'm fucking tired. What happened to me? It seems that your prior knowledge and enlightenments on the principles of space and time helped you absorb much more than I initially expected. Like anarchy forced a rationalization within your soul, the Weaver has exposed to you the conceptual of dimensional abstraction. You could say that without breaking the Great Barrier, this is the best level of comprehension you can achieve. Congratulations. You've brought your barrier forward. Amara turned her gaze, looking through the lens of her aura. The Great Barrier, that perpetual wall of golden light in the distance, was now no longer on the horizon. It was close, uncomfortably close. Not quite within reach, but close enough for her to understand that if she wanted to acquire a higher level of power, that barrier would stop her. It triggered Amara's memories of Nanan, her mind replaying the scenes of when he reached out to kill that King Blood. They had seen chains manifest around his arm, preventing him from using power he didn't earn, until he broke it, rose to another level, and used that power to kill a King Blood and entire authority higher than him. If Amara wasn't careful, this barrier would do the same to her. Until she broke it, she would be limited. It was exactly how her mother was. Although a higher authority afforded her another affinity and greater amounts of mana, it didn't necessarily afford her more comprehension. What she had likely came simply with time and accumulation rather than achieving a higher level. Now, Amara had seen what Zirian and the Weaver called the conceptual, a level of power locked behind the Great Barrier, and far more powerful than anything Amara was capable of now. It was what set sovereigns apart from others so heavily, why they seemed like gods while everyone else was mere magi. Anarchy could split the skies in two with a single slash of the blade. An Authority 11 marshal manning a stronghold was still at the mercy of tactical combat, much stronger than chiefs, but not capable of ruling an entire war by themselves, and certainly on a lesser plane of existence compared to anarchy. The conceptual, that power, was the key. More than ever, Amara burned with the desire to shatter the barrier and grasp that power. She had already achieved so much. She could do so much more. Her ambition flared, and then her exhaustion brought her back down. Her body was tired even though her soul brimmed with incredible potential. Her mana reserves were topped off, and she felt like she could topple a city, but her limbs didn't want to move. Zirian spoke as Amara pulled herself to her feet unsteadily. It's been 2 days. You need to recover, my pupil. Food and rest will serve you well. Agreed. My stomach is churning. Please sit. I will call someone to bring you to your quarters where you can eat. A wheelchair appeared next to Amara, her body collapsing into it with little grace. She brushed her white hair out of her face, looking down at the chair, crafted expertly. You just have a wheelchair? I ordered one to be made when you collapsed. I had a feeling walking would be difficult after your ordeal. Thank you, my clairvoyant master Zirian. You flatter me. The two smiled at each other, a servant arriving to cart Amara away. For the next day, she spent her time both recovering and mentally preparing spells. Zirian had used the Weaver to infuse his personal spells into her, since technically they weren't his, but his master's, who made the grimoire. She knew them like they had always been in her mind, but that didn't mean she could cast them. Still, their applications were extraordinary. She received a full set of comprehensive teleportation spells that didn't require an entire building's worth of enchantments. All it required was waypoints, established coordinates that were inlaid into space permanently. With them, Amara could teleport to any of her waypoints, even going so far as to bring people with her, with just the cast of a spell. It was a semi-stationary teleportation. She could shift positions, but it still relied on a permanent waypoint. The waypoints could also only be established personally, meaning she had to go to the place to create a waypoint. She couldn't just teleport anywhere she wanted. Not yet, anyway. Another series of spells did just that, but she wouldn't be capable of using them until she breached the Great Barrier. Other than the teleportation spells, Zirian had infused combat spells of the spatial and dimensional nature. They were far more developed than Amara's crude usage of spatial fractures to hurt her enemies, And while some were exceedingly difficult and dangerous to use, others were within her capabilities, able to be used immediately. She smiled. Both short and long-term gains had been made in spades. That wasn't mentioning the spells she had developed for Iron Legion logistics, her own unique spells that she could improve a magnitude over with her newfound knowledge and awareness given by the Weaver. She wasted no time. After mentally preparing her spells for a day, she recovered enough to put them down on paper and test them. She spent a mere day testing her spells, improving them, and making them fieldable. It was painfully easy when she used both her aura and dimensional awareness, which she was calling grid space. A second day was used to put on the final touches. It was only at the end of that day that Amara finally called John, giving him the good news. It wasn't much longer afterward that the time came to leave. Outside the teleportation nexus, Amara looked up at Zirian, eager to leave, but not so eager that she couldn't give her goodbyes. Master Zirian, you've helped me immensely. I hope I'll be able to repay this debt someday. Hardly, my pupil. What you're attempting to accomplish is worth more than what I've given you, which is why you must promise to come back when you've breached the Great Barrier. I will have more for you then. I may just take you up on that. Amara smiled and bowed. Thank you again, Master. Anytime. Now go and reap what you have sown. I expect great news in time. Amara nodded and parted ways, heading through the teleporter and leaving the gateway. Her eyes glistened as she shuttled through space. All the secrets of her transportation laid bare. Although difficult to keep up with, she was still able to comprehend what was happening around her. When she was finally spit out, she stood there blankly for a few seconds before smiling. Her eyes lifted, seeing John standing there. She took a step, crossing the distance between them instantly and jumping into his arms. He almost recoiled. Whoa there. Phaidon might feel threatened if you take his party trick. Good thing I have no interest in the mundane. John chuckled as they hugged, exchanging a kiss before Amara suddenly pulled away and whipped out a book. John's brows raised as he took it. What's this? A small grimoire that I made for you. Go ahead, read it. He smiled before opening it, starting from the first page and flipping through every one after a second or two. It didn't take more than a minute to get to the end. After the last page, he snapped the book shut, staring at the back cover for a short time. Then Amara felt his arm snake around her waist. He pulled her against his body, looking down into her eyes with a wide grin. Have I ever told you how much I love you? Every day, actually. Go ahead and stab me if I ever happen to forget. Because you are the smartest, most gorgeous, most lovely and radiant and hard-working and creative and stunning and powerful and skillful and beautiful and sexy and cute and dash. All right. She laughed as he started planting kisses all over her neck and face. Once he had spun her around enough, he put her down and grabbed her hand, pulling her along. Come, my dear. We have no time to waste. Iron Legion calls for slaughter, and you have the key to their final shackle. To Wonderland? To Wonderland. They walked out of the building, boarding a helicopter that was still spun up, Erhin waiting outside of it. They boarded, taking off and flying a short distance to the airport where a plane was waiting. Soon they were in the air, and that's when Amara noticed something different. She looked outside, sensing their speed, her brows raising. They finally made a stable supersonic engine. They made one a while ago. We're still manufacturing them for the new airframes. They aren't as easy or cheap to produce, and most of our facilities are at full production capacity anyway. Plus, I intend to keep these things a bit more secret, which means fewer numbers. Still, their dominance will make up for it. Has the Scourge started fielding more flyers? They have. They've become a major factor in the war and have already started taking out planes. Dogfighting is more common, but soon enough our pilots won't have to deal with them. We'll re-establish air superiority within the month. These new planes are capable of Mach 2, not as fast as other prototypes, but far more fuel-efficient and maneuverable. They have no equal, not to mention the expanded logistical capabilities afforded by jet cargo planes. I've already got an aerial supercarrier being developed. John showed her a blueprint. The plane on it boasting specs far greater than their current largest cargo plane, the C-400. She looked at the numbers, then gawked. What the fuck? Wingspan of 600 meters? Is that even possible? Yup. Thanks to magic, this fantasy can be reality. What would you even use this for? I would think the law of diminishing returns makes this rather inefficient. Such laws are superseded by the rule of cool. Amara's face went flat, John looking oh so proud of himself. And it would be used as an aerial fortress. Can you imagine how many supplies could be moved with that thing? All it would take is a teleportation platform built inside of it, and you could send and receive supplies without even landing. Right, because you'd need a runway how long to accommodate this thing? I'm thinking 10 miles long would be sufficient. Lord Almighty. Amara sighed, looking through the rest of the specifications before handing it back to John. I mean, it looks powerful enough. Good, because it's already in production. Huh? Why? We've got enough on our plate as it is, and you want to build the equivalent of a flying town? It would take a crew of hundreds just to man it. Where are you going to pull the personnel from? I don't know. That's an issue for future me to figure out. For now, I want it built, which by itself shouldn't be that difficult. We have the materials. The designs just need to be worked on. I want to make it capable of flying in the air indefinitely. John gazed off into space, Amara looking up at him and seeing that sparkle in his eye. She just smiled and ran her fingers through his hair. You know what? It's a marvelous idea, dear. I'll work on some enchantments for it. Just don't stress yourself. You've done more than enough by handing me this grimoire. I've already designed the storage components to accommodate the enchantments. They would just have to be installed on our vehicles. The days of loading tank breaches are over. I'm excited to see them turn into autocannons. That's a scary thought, Amara muttered, going quiet as John started pondering. The plane they were in, as a result of being equipped with the latest jet engines and being capable of going Mach 2, helped them arrive at their destination sooner rather than later. After touching down in Wonderland, the two of them rushed to the workshops to encrypt the enchantments. The process was quick, and soon they were handing them off to the warlocks so they could start enchanting the prototypes that had been prepared long in advance. Since Amara had mentioned her successes to John, he had assembled what he needed to make sure that the fruits of her labor could be tested and fielded as soon as possible. By the end of the day, they had already made great progress. John's mood couldn't have been any better, so to top it all off, they left Wonderland for the night to go dine in one of the nicest restaurants in the capital. At the same time, John quietly sent out messages to Sector 4, and the pieces started moving, promising quiet retribution for the sins of the past. Chapter 298, Defiant. Bye, losers. Just fucking leave, will you? What kind of send-off is that? Bitch. No fuck you, bitch. Guys. Aki sighed as Kata nearly went to blows with Blackblood, grabbing her friend's bandaged arm and pulling. We need to go, Kata. Blackblood, fuck off for a bit. She's the one who started it. And it better end here before I rip someone's jaw off. Kata, let's go. We're already late. Aki pulled again, Kata finally giving and following out of the room. As they headed through the door, Kata turned around one more time, her eyes seeking out the man standing next to Phaidon. She smiled and waved, his eyes meeting hers. Bye, Pontek. Pontek slowly waved back, looking confused as Kata was pulled out by Aki. The two went to the roof of the hardpoint and boarded a helicopter waiting for them. On it, they flew back to the glass desert before boarding one of the planes there, a standard propeller transport plane. They were soon in the air. Their destination, the Holy See. After calming down, Aki lounged back into the plush couch and glanced at Kata. She had gone quiet. Her white and black hair was combed and straight, partially draped over her red eye, her blue eye staring into space motionlessly. Aki fidgeted a bit. She had gotten a message from John only the night before. Their vacation back to the Holy See had been approved by him, but of natural course, it didn't come without contingents. Aki knew that John was concerned about both of them leaking intelligence. Whether it was on him, on their operations, or the most classified secrets such as that on the island of continuance, none of it was something John wanted the Order knowing. Aki had no issues wondering why. They were his core secrets, as significant or not as they were. It didn't help that Polly had been breathing down her neck too. Sector 4 hadn't been watching them too much, but Aki had no illusions about privacy either. If they did or said something they shouldn't, John would find out about it. Aki wasn't concerned about herself. She had no intentions of betraying John's trust. Kata was the wild card though. Not even Aki was sure what she would do when her father started asking questions. Aki stared at Kata for a bit before breaking the silence. How do you feel about seeing your father? It's been a long time. No different than I would when coming back from extended operations with the Order. Even those were only a month or so at a time, though. It's been almost a year since you saw him last Christmas. Before that, it had been a year and a half. It's not that big of a deal. Kata kicked her feet over and laid down between chairs. Aki glanced at her athletic legs exposed between a few sets of clean bandages. Some of her pale skin was marred by more scars, a consequence of the strenuous battles they had been going through. Iron Legion had them in a unique position. Most of daily life was easy and comfortable. Even the battles were easier compared to what the Order's Tier 1 teams would normally face. At Sector 4, they were supported by missiles, helicopters, special bombs, and a virtually infinite amount of money and resources. But that meant that the battles where the missiles and explosive devices didn't work were that much harder to handle. It was often a precarious balance between trusting the technology they had been given and completing the mission through sheer grit. They were given more, and then they had to accomplish more. Was it comparable to the Order's Tier 1 teams? No, it wasn't. But not even the Order could compare to Iron Legion's near-zero casualty rates. Kata would argue that the Order made things unnecessarily difficult, whereas Iron Legion had the money to burn to save both time and effort. She was given both challenges and the room for recovery, which meant her rate of crystallization was extremely low compared to before. She had gotten stronger with Iron Legion faster than she would have with the Order, all without the normal burden that demanded constant healing to keep her body together. Aki had seen Kata's growth. She herself had undergone great changes. She didn't think it was possible to get stronger than she had been while fighting for survival at the Pillars of Creation, given she had taken so many years off. But not only had she reached her previous peak of strength, she surpassed it and then continued to hone herself. Iron Legion provided her with battles against royals at Authority 10 while making them safe enough for her to learn from and experiment with. That wasn't something anyone else could do. Everyone on the Desert Eagles was growing quickly. Aki sometimes thought they were advancing too fast, but as the war escalated, it demanded greater sacrifices and strength. She knew that better than anyone. But unlike at the Pillars of Creation, she felt like she had some control here. Aki didn't press Kata anymore. The two spent the rest of the plane ride sleeping and eating, eventually landing in an airfield where they disembarked and boarded another helicopter. They were flown to the Corpella Peerage, landing on top of the massive building and descending toward one of the main floors for the family. Finally, they faced a pair of large gilded doors. Kata directly pushed them open, Aki following her. The reception hall greeted them with more people than expected. There were butlers moving about, serving snacks and drinks to the 6 people lounging on a low table surrounded by couches. General Valdemar Corpella, Kata's father, sat there with 3 paladins. The first was Halolite, who smiled at Kata when she walked in. The second was Nazarim Medraut, the paladin of the Medraut Peerage and an Authority 12 warlock. The third was Anderson, who similarly smiled at the pair with his signature wide grin. Kata's mother, Kyria Corpella, sat by her husband while General Jory sat in a nearby chair, looking out of place but mustering enough confidence to act like he belonged. Aki felt a bit of pressure seeing all of them, and Anderson's immediate words didn't help. The ghosts finally decided to show themselves. For a time, we weren't sure that you two existed anymore. I look forward to stories. I apologize for our lack of reports. The nature of our operations meant that there wasn't much room for outside communication. Aki smiled back as she and Kata took their seat on a couch. Kata was quick to reach over and grab some sweet treats, a smile blooming as she bit into pastries and candies. It's been so long. Iron Legion calls itself rich, but God forbid we ever get anything sweet. Kata, Valdemar called, Kata responding while keeping her eyes glued to the pile of treats in front of her. Yes, Papa. Can you tell me about Sector 4 and your recent operations with them? Wow, straight into it, huh? I didn't think I'd have to beat around the bush with you. Kata shrugged, Valdemar leaning back and watching her. I suppose not. But I don't know what you expect from me either. Half of what Iron Legion does is keep secrets, and John has no illusions about who I am. As true as that may be, I'm quite sure you know things we have no idea about. The Order now has a vested interest in Iron Legion's operations in the Northwestern theaters, given recent Scourge movements. I was hoping you could shed some light on the situation over there. Kata remained silent, chewing her pastry for several seconds before swallowing and letting out a breath. Iron Legion has established a Maginot Line over 100 miles long in order to deal with the incoming millions of Scourge. He expects that they will be able to rebuff the attack. Yet there is a sovereign over there, the same one that brought down the treehouse. What's his plan for that? Dunno. He said he had it covered. That's all I know because that's all he tells anyone. I assume he got another sovereign to help him with the issue. Valdemar frowned and glanced at Anderson, who chuckled. Fuck if I know about his plans. He certainly didn't come to me. What other sovereigns could he have enough of a relationship with that they would help him kill a scourge sovereign? Question of the year, isn't it? Anderson chuckled as Valdemar pondered. Not from the kingdom, not from the church, a third party we don't obviously know the identity of. Perhaps a paragon? But they wouldn't risk stepping out this early, not even the dragons. Anderson hummed with a smile, Valdemar eyeing him for a second before sighing. Yet another item to investigate. Indeed, John Cooper holds plenty of secrets, and we've let them remain uncovered for too long. Nazara Medraut suddenly spoke, both Aki and Kata turning to stare at him. He met their gaze and asked, with what technology does he expect to repel millions of scourge? Unless he multiplies his forces, such an errand should be impossible. He plans to do it with a large wall. A large wall. If that were all he had up his sleeve, then I doubt you would place your livelihood in his hands. Well, Iron Legion is rich. They can afford strong walls and plentiful ordnance. And where are they sourcing these materials from? Kata's mouth clicked shut, Nazarim smiling. We've been getting readings from the area. The mana levels are off the charts, indicative of constant heavy battle. Question is, neither Iron Legion nor Son Industries should have the material to manufacture as much ordnance as they have, especially since they haven't ordered anything from us. Just by the numbers, sustaining such a war is an impossible endeavor. Yet you seem to have enough confidence in him to stay and fight. Nazarim leaned forward. Where is John Cooper getting his material from? Does it matter? Oh yes, it most certainly does. Iron Legion is responsible for half the war on our continent. Yet John Cooper insists on keeping everything secret. Thankfully, we have two individuals who have seen things from the inside, and I'm quite interested to hear about his source of material, considering that the mana levels indicate that he alone is fielding more ordnance than the entirety of the Holy Sea's forces. It should be impossible, because he is not an entire nation. Aki kept her neutral face. She hadn't thought about things like that. It was clear that these conclusions were speculation, but there was always a certain degree of sound logic attached. John was operating Iron Legion as if it were backed by an entire nation of wealth and resources. While his technology could make up a portion of the gap, there was still an obvious discrepancy left behind. That discrepancy was obviously the island of continuance. That island was providing Iron Legion with an inexhaustible supply of air, water, earth, and fire mana crystals. If it were factored into sheer wealth, Iron Legion was currently several times richer than both the Holy See and Kingdom combined. What they had fielded, and what was sitting in supply depots waiting to be spent, was just a small portion of what continuance offered, and they were consuming those resources like children in a room full of candy. That wasn't even mentioning the technology John had found there. He had obviously kept the details from them, especially regarding the anomaly. Nobody was sure what it did, but it had already spawned a new line of tech that Sector 4 had benefited from massively. And if Aki knew anything about John, it was that he enjoyed keeping secrets. What he exposed was the mere tip of the iceberg. She couldn't imagine what he was brewing in Wonderland. Hell, the only reason she knew about Wonderland was because that's where the tech they got came from, and where a few of the Desert Eagles got to visit. Most of Sector 4 knew it was a place. Nobody knew what went on over there. As Aki struggled to figure out what to say, Kata let out a groan. Geez, did you fail to understand John's tech? He's given the church how much and you're still asking questions? Besides, what makes you think he didn't keep secrets from us? We know you were in Sector 4. You may not know everything, but you still know far more than we do. This is a matter of ensuring the success of the war. We need to know John Cooper's capabilities. No, you want to know his capabilities because you want to know whether he's enough of a threat or not. And I think all the tech he's given you is enough of an answer to that question. Papa, how many super heavy tanks do you have operational? Kata turned away from Nazarim, tilting her head at her father while he answered. 216 so far. That's it. You've had all this time, and you've only rolled out a quarter of what John has on the front lines. Are you saying he has nearly 1,000 super heavy tanks on the battlefield? Well, duh. Granted, they aren't doing much more than acting as emplacements since the line was built, but that's still a couple thousand cannons to use against the Scourge. Valdemar frowned again. We only built as many as we did because more tanks mean greater expenditures. We've got an entire industry for generating mana crystals running around the clock, but given the rates of fire, we can't produce enough to keep up, nor can we justify the expense compared to the efficiency of our armies. And you're saying that John Cooper is able to sustain a mechanized army multiple times larger than ours? I know, crazy, right? It's pretty amazing watching them. Kata suddenly smiled at her father. You've got some competition, Papa. I wonder what you'll think when John wipes out the incoming army of millions. His strength and measure of resources would have to vastly exceed our expectations. Even with his technology, an army of 50,000 shouldn't be able to stand against such numbers, not unless he has an unlimited supply of crystals. That would be the logical thought, wouldn't it? Kata laughed a bit and lounged back, Valdemar and Nazarim looking at each other. Nazarim had an ugly look on his face. We need more information, Valdemar. And I have a feeling your daughter is insisting on being defiant. My daughter's business is mine, Nazarim. But yes, John Cooper obviously holds more secrets than we initially thought. Don't press him now, however. Success or not, his focus needs to be on the upcoming battles. He's been given too much power. I know you want him to help hold the River of Desolation, but we can't give him this much freedom. By the time the battle ends, his incentive to reveal information will be low. He'll have no trouble shrinking back into his dark corners. This is exactly the time to start prying, while he's in the open, while things are more obvious than not. Valdemar went silent, not immediately answering. That's when Anderson suddenly turned his head, looking straight at Nazarim and catching everyone's attention. Your efforts will be counterproductive. He would dare resist us? The only reason you asked that question is because you know nothing about him. Leave the kid alone and let him do his work. Waiting and watching will show you more than attempting to look where you shouldn't. Because unless you decide to step out personally, the only thing treading on his turf will do is earn you corpses and eyes on your dirty laundry. He doesn't have the balls to spy on a sovereign, let alone the ability to. Huh. Kata suddenly barked a laugh, looking at Nazarim with barely concealed derision. If it helps you sleep at night, keep telling yourself that. Nazarim's face darkened, turning toward Anderson with a silent question. Anderson shrugged. She's not wrong. It seems like I've my own work to do then. He suddenly stood, walking toward the door. Good day. Nobody responded, watching him leave and only speaking when the door closed behind him. Valdemar sighed and looked at his daughter. Kata, Aki, you two should retire. I didn't mean to interrogate as soon as you returned. Still, I hope that two important assets of the Holy See won't withhold everything they know for someone they hold no allegiances to. As long as you understand that betraying his secrecy means I won't get to go back. Kata retorted blandly and stood, Aki following in uncomfortable silence. Good night, everyone. Good night. Valdemar's brows raised as they left, glancing at the clock, which pointed at noon. Hallowlight chuckled when they disappeared behind the door. Tired children. I'm sure running night missions has their sleep cycle flipped backwards. I suppose. Valdemar sighed once more, thinking that he was doing so far too often. Then he glanced at Anderson. I need to talk to you. I'm an open book. There were unauthorized visits to the gateway. Know anything about it? Please, I haven't been there in years. Valdemar narrowed his eyes. Lying is sinful. So is asking unnecessary questions. It's been some time since you've kept secrets from me, Anderson. It's been some time since there's been something worth keeping close to the chest. You don't trust me? That's what I should be asking. Valdemar rubbed his temples, looking at Anderson with a tired gaze. I don't enjoy politicking. This is hardly politics, and it'll stay that way so long as you don't press. You're not as uncompromised as you like to think you are, Valdemar. So here's my warning. Let John Cooper do his work. Don't pry where you shouldn't. Don't give him a reason to turn his attention to you. And don't let that idiot Nazarim give him a reason to turn his attention to the peerages. The kingdom isn't the only place with dark corners, and if John finds out that his ally might be darker than expected, things will get very dirty, very fast. And John's secrets? You don't think they're worth bringing to light? What if he's falling himself? In a way, he already is. But he's serving our purposes, and as much as you hate to believe it, we need his help. He may have created this mess, but that's because he knows how to clean it up. So let him. Otherwise, it'll be on us, and our three-front war will become 5, and you'll miss out on the big surprise he's preparing for us. Valdemar looked skeptical. Surprise? What kind? The kind that my Tier 1 teams are really going to enjoy. You will too, of course, but I'm already promised first dibs, and I won't let you take it away from me. So keep your nose out, and if John's silent threats aren't enough, then I will have to be. Fine, fine. Valdemar gave a final sigh, escaping as Anderson stood. Then that's all the business I have. I'm going to bring Kata out to play later. Do your interrogations before then. Valdemar just rolled his eyes, Anderson finally leaving. That's when he looked over, eyeing his wife and Halolite. He smirked. You two just love the drama, huh? Indeed. Of course. Halolite nodded, Valdemar's wife giving him a big smile. He chuckled wryly before turning his attention to Halolite. Your college is at the gateway. Do your sisters know anything? They do, in fact. I got quite the earful the other day. The sisters love their stories and rumors, as you already know. So, anything I should know about? Well, Halolite thought for a second, her smile turning to a chuckle. No, I don't think there is. Oh, how I love being out of the loop. It's nothing I hadn't already seen a long time ago. Don't worry, it's nothing you should worry about. And yet I can't know about it. Let's just say, you wouldn't like what you heard. Your decisions then would be as muddled as what they saw. But I've seen past it, so don't worry yourself. Valdemar's face fell flat, his efforts devoted to not sighing for the dozenth time today. He was getting lightheaded already. Fine. Damn it all then. It's not like I can't go with the flow, as the young ones put it. Who cares if I know critical intel regarding the direction of the war? So long as everyone but me knows, things will go just fine. Valdemar stood, walking toward the door while muttering to himself. The two women just looked at each other and laughed. Chapter 299, Apostolic Palace. November 27th, 628. Zoning out was a rather interesting neurological function. The ability to mute out stimuli and focus on nothing seemed entirely unproductive. It was the same with memories, how the body would go on autopilot during monotonous tasks, and when it was all said and done, you'd never remember any part of the hours of zoned-out work. Over the last handful of years, I had become incapable of it. With every advancement, my mental faculties would reach new heights. After creating my second spark, the task of creating memories and remembering things was no longer a task. It was barely a function my body had to engage in. It simply happened. Like a laser engraving data onto a disk, it was a mere consequence of physics. In some sense, everything could be considered just that. For the first time in years, though, I had done it. I had finally managed to zone out, and not how I usually did, where I'd simply crunch mental tasks while looking like I was bored and frozen. No, I had finally managed to ignore something. I finally had a gap, albeit brief, in my memories. It was something I hadn't seen outside of sleeping since I got my second spark, and something that became increasingly seldom after around Authority 3. The only downside was that it had come to be after 2 straight weeks of being awake. The upside was that I had discovered that zoning out was a brain's way of either coping with things or defragging. If it wasn't being used to block out excessive stimuli, it was being used to process memories and put them into long-term storage. I sat cross-legged on the very edge of the top of the hardpoint, right on top of a bunker that overlooked what had become no man's land. Erhin stood behind me. I could hear how the wind blew against his body and the fabrics of his suit, sensed the faint shifts of his body, his arms in his sleeves, his feet in his shoes, even his abdomen in his shirt. Was it a little dangerous here, sitting right against the edge where I could see straight down a couple hundred meters? Sure it was. Plenty of flying monsters had already tried to swoop down and grab me. Thankfully, the anti-air turrets were working out well, and most had been killed before they could get close. Anything that slipped past was killed by Erhun, my diligent butler. I frowned when I started hearing everything again. I knew I was getting tired, but zoning out had felt great. It had come and gone so quickly since I realized what was happening mere seconds after it started. Like a dream, it had faded as fast as it came. Now I was just annoyed. I quickly dropped a mute field next to me, which deployed and silenced all sounds from the outside. The silence contrasted with the views of battle below. I saw every explosion of fire from every avenue of attack, even saw the devastation that other elemental projectiles caused. Wonderland had started coming out with unconventional spells and slapping them onto other elemental crystals, giving them value on the battlefield. After all, fire crystals were 68% of our crystal expenditures. Explosions were just too useful on the battlefield, and the only other crystal used in significant amounts was the air crystal, which often complemented the fire crystals. After that, it was the earth crystals, those being used to saturate the wall with mana and strengthen it. Now, there were earth crystals being used in munitions. They weren't spatial rounds, but they still tore nasty new assholes in the enemy. I'd have to start thinking of something to use the water crystals for. But of course I had other pressing matters to use my brainpower for. I had spent only a brief period in the territory of the Verksmarkiate handling the new biological outbreak. For now there was a lot to do, and none of it required my presence. My troops were more than capable of handling themselves, and I had Sector 4 there to collect samples that they would deliver to Wonderland for safe study. It was a dangerous disease, but I had long developed gear to prevent contamination. So long as nobody got lazy, I wouldn't have to deal with an outbreak amidst my own staff. We had already gotten results in the past couple weeks of study, but the analysis that came back wasn't pointing in a good direction. Based solely on the magical signature of the disease, it could be safely assumed that it came from the Scourge. There had yet to be any incidents that might expose the presence of Scourge agents in the area, but as it turned out, the Verksmarkiate wasn't the only place hit. I already knew such would come to pass. There were 4 other noble territories that had seen a recent outbreak in the past month, and 2 of them had already come to me for help. I sent minimal batches of 50 to 100 Iron Legion soldiers as specialists to help with containment, but I had no illusions about being of any significant help unless I could find a cure. What made it clearly of Scourge make was also the fact that all 4 nobles were still human, not Nephilim. I could deduce that other human noble territories would be hit, so I sent out anonymous notices in advance to prepare them. Still, the damage would be unavoidable, and based on the projections of spread and the symptoms of disease, the damage would be catastrophic. I could unfortunately do little about it. Iron Legion didn't have the manpower to spare despite the generous offers from those nobles. Extracting 100 here or there would quickly add up if I had to do it enough, not to mention that they had plenty of manpower themselves. Still, it brought into question the scale of this war. This world's population wasn't large. As a consequence of still being a relatively non-industrialized society where the majority of the population was agricultural, population growth wasn't incredible even with magic. At least, that was for the ordinary population. Magi had a whole other path of development, and based on my projections after collecting historical data from places like the libraries of various nobles, they seemed like they were rapidly expanding to the point of overtaking their non-magical counterparts. After doing my own consensus, I had come out with a population estimate sitting around 375 million. The kingdom had double the population of the church, the former at 275 million, the latter at 100 million. Based on the scale of both military and magi concentrations, the Magus population rested at around 15 million, with 9 million residing in the kingdom and 6 million in the church. This would be considered high, but when I mapped out the meat grinder that was the war with the Scourge and then overlaid it with projected estimates, without significant deviations alongside the average lifespan of a Magus and average guesstimate fertility rates, I found out that this number was actually low. It should be at least double if not triple, but the Scourge was outbreeding humanity and the war demanded its sacrifices. Unfortunately, ordinary humans couldn't help in that department, and the population had long stagnated due to death tolls. That left 360 million ordinary humans. They were the vast majority, but held very little true power for obvious reasons. Nonetheless, they were an extremely important resource for the Magi. They were the source of food, resources, and general labor. They supplied the entire economy, and the Magi simply multiplied its value with magic. Humanity's war with the Scourge relied on this vast population of ordinary humans. Soldiers had to be fed, clothed, and supplied with resources and logistics. This didn't happen without ordinary humans, and as in every war, the principal targets of both sides would be the supply lines. Cut off the supply, and even the Magi would crumble. I had a feeling that the Scourge was attempting to do this. The Nephilim were the primary method. Corrupt humanity from the inside and strife would break them enough to hamstring the military. This new epidemic was just another addition to that plan. Riddle prosperous economic territories with disease, and their output would plummet. Then the ordinary population would die off, even if the Magi managed to live. The big question was, How many ordinary humans had to die in order to economically devastate humanity? The answer wasn't large. The population wasn't large to begin with. If the pillars of creation and mantle of wisdom were still kicking and the scourge didn't exist, this world's population could be well past 1 billion. But reality was a bitch, and their threshold for economic shock was unfortunately low. I wasn't sure about the precise calculations, but I didn't need to be. I had a good feeling about what would happen because I was going to be a major part of it. Village and town exterminations as well as assassinations were starting to slow. After Amara developed the teleportation spells we needed and the finalized enchantments were tested and given the green light on reliability, Sector 4 got busy deploying them. It would take some time to rig every vault across Kingdom territory, especially since a large portion of the manpower was still dedicated toward Iron Legion operations and the extermination campaign. There weren't so many people who I trusted to handle such a delicate task as infiltrating the most top-secret areas of High Nobles. I had many different operations ongoing simultaneously. In scale, the extermination campaign, vault infiltration, and epidemic research was small, seemingly less important than a full frontal war. I had to keep them all moving anyway, even if my focus was on one more than others. They all had their crucial roles to play, and I unfortunately had to be their playwright. I was thanking God for being a summoner during these times, since my advancement didn't rely on physical strain or magical practice. I could advance even while busy with day-to-day affairs. I could make steady progress through the mental study of my advancement formations. It had been a year since I last advanced to Authority 8, and I was steadily on my way to Authority 9. It wasn't necessarily going to be here soon, but I also wasn't rushing it. The reason for that was precisely what I found myself staring at on this auspicious day. In the silence of my mute field, I stared at the horizon where that great barrier perpetually rested. I had found that it was closer than before. Over time, it was closing the distance, and as I had heard from Amara, one key to getting closer was the conceptual. I wasn't sure what the hell it was, but it had helped Amara massively despite hurting her just as much. It was closer than it was a year ago, but I hadn't made any significant strides in attempting to pull it further. I had been too busy priming everything for my moves, but I had not been without personal growth either. I was at least halfway to Authority 9, but more than that, the technology one had developed over time was only growing more terrifying. The SER knife was just the tip of the iceberg. My new line of program magic was growing deeper in complexity, and if taking a concept far into the extreme was how Amara was able to get closer to the Great Barrier, then perhaps I needed to follow in her footsteps using strengths of my own. The mantle's technology was perhaps the gateway toward cracking the secrets of Magicka and its transmutation, but its potential went far beyond that singular application. The shield that had protected the anomaly on the island of continuance was one application that represented countless others, the ability to program Psyche and thereby influence both mana and vigor with it. They had harnessed the power of all 3 Magi classes with Psycho alone, and yet that shield was a crude use of the tech. If it were taken further, it had the potential to elevate the Summoner class to heights capable of creating an Authority 12, just like Knights and Warlocks. I had a feeling that was the path I needed to walk. If that was the case, though, I couldn't rush my advancement. I had to develop this tech alongside my advancements, not letting it fall behind so that I could break the Great Barrier at a suitable moment. I figured that the earlier I broke the Great Barrier, the better off I would be when I waded through Authority 10 and 11. I didn't want to wait, and time spent on one was time taken away from the other. I had to simply balance the two. I gathered my thoughts, something I had done 1,000 times over the last few weeks, and grabbed the mute field. It deactivated, and the cacophony of sounds slammed into my ears. It was no longer as annoying, just background noise like it was supposed to be. I could feel the pull of exhaustion creeping around my mind. 2 weeks of constant activity was a challenge I put myself through, and while I could probably push it another week, I hardly had the desire. It would be a week of fighting to concentrate and stamp down irritability, and my generals didn't deserve that after the good work they had been doing on the line. Hun, at your service. He stepped up when I called, my eyes glancing downward at the massive wall underneath me. Well, it was more of a cliffside than a wall. I've got wedding business to attend to in the Holy See on the 30th, right after the Magisterium students leave. Amara doesn't want it to be on New Year's, so it was moved up. The wedding is now on the 10th. which means I have just under 2 weeks to get prepared. Thankfully, those who had concerns have already been mostly informed and informally invited. Proper invitations will be getting delivered soon, but it is still extremely short notice. Either way, Amara and I need transport. We've been granted an audience with the Pope that evening. It will be prepared. Thank you. As for now, if you could retrieve the written evaluations of the students from Instructor Bria for me and bring them to my study, that would be appreciated. Of course, sir. He turned and stepped away, my gaze lingering on the battlefield for a time longer. Then I finally got off my lazy ass and left, my mind on the list of tasks I needed to complete before the wedding arrived. November 30th, 628. All teams, 5-minute warning. Faye felt her heart rate rise when she heard the echoing voice over the announcement system. She wasn't the one who needed to do checks, but she still went down her mental list anyway. The pitched sounds of metal screamed around her as massive machines started groaning to life. The train cars were already docked behind them, hatches open and ready for deposit. The metal structures of those train cars lingered with poisonous mana despite their reinforcement and containment enchantments. Faye could feel it through her armor, but she felt that she had gotten somewhat used to it over the last couple weeks. No matter what, though, she felt like it was impossible to get used to what she was about to do. You ready, kid? She looked up, her mental list pausing as her superior walked over. He was the captain of her harvester team, in his mouth a burning stick of moonshine that glowed silver and let off smoke. An actual drug, unlike the cigars John often smoked. She wondered how he had managed to get some all the way to the line. Iron Legion was not known for its relaxed security. There was probably some silent, no harm, no foul agreement with the supply guys going on. She nodded, not daring to take off her helmet like he did. She felt like suffocating whenever she tried that in these staging bays. Nervous as always. Well, you're doing better than puke over there. Just remember that these machines here will kill you long before any lingering monsters do. I still remember one guy, an Authority 7 Knight, who somehow managed to sneak his hand in and get his arm grabbed by the grinders. Only reason he didn't get pulled in like all the other corpses and get chopped into strips was because one of his friends had a fast enough reaction to cut his arm off at the shoulder. Poor fucker lost his dominant arm, will never swing a sword again. Wow. Faye responded as enthusiastically as she could. This was the 6th person she had personally heard that story from and the 100th time it had been told. Everyone in the harvesting section knew it, and they loved telling the story to all the students that cycled through. This was the 2nd time that Faye had cycled through this section. It was the first place she was sent to after they had been given their assignments and brief training upon arrival. Unlike last time, the students had been sent all across the hardpoint and had taken up various jobs. It was just as John had told them. They would be given work and responsibility, and they had to fulfill their role as a cog in the machine. Each person had been given 3 random jobs that they cycled through every handful of days. Just a couple days ago, they were given the options to choose any job that they wanted to end their excursion on. Faye had enjoyed her time in the harvesting section. It was one of the only sections that got to go out into no man's land, and the only one of that category that students were allowed into. So she had picked it for her final section. They obviously weren't allowed to do something like join a recon team that was dropped in the middle of enemy territory, as much as Faye would have loved the opportunity. Their job was simple, but also considered the most dangerous. Sure, they only left the wall when the battle was over, but it was still unpredictable, toxic, and gross. It wasn't a coveted job. Faye found that she enjoyed it though, but only because her armor was made with bleeding-edge tech. With it, she wasn't bothered by the fields of corpses, body parts, pools of blood, growing bloodthorn, poisonous atmosphere, or other highly undesirable details. That also wasn't mentioning that when there wasn't a battle to worry about, they had little to do. Most of the time she got to hang out in the garages, either helping clean gear and wash the harvesters or sitting at the side listening to everyone's stupid banter. It may not have been enjoyable during her first cycle, but after her latter 2 cycles, she realized that it was much more exciting and wanted to come back. She glanced at the harvester itself. It was a massive machine, and at the moment, remarkably clean despite its job. There was the cabin itself that was rather heavily armored with a glass front. And then there was the huge set of grinders on the front responsible for scooping and eating all the corpses it drove over. It would grind up the corpses, and through mechanisms she wasn't entirely sure of, would filter out the black crystals from the flesh. There were many dozens of teams of harvesters besides their own, and all of them would go out after every battle with an escort. Faye's job in all of this was being an auxiliary scooper. It was a nasty job where she would walk next to the harvesters and use large forks to skewer and scoop straggling corpses into the side intakes of the harvester. Normally, they didn't have to do much since there were plows between each harvester that would plow the corpses into their lanes. But if there was ever a corpse or two that slipped by, she would be the one to toss it in. All teams, 1-minute warning. The harvester looked as brutal as its job, and that was despite most of its butchering assembly being hidden behind plates of metal and safety gates so that no humans got caught in it. Still, what little she could see exposed promises written in blood of becoming a mixture if she wasn't careful. All teams, gates open. With the last announcement, the massive gates lifted and exposed the battlefield beyond. The breeze brought with it a heavy atmosphere and unbearable stench. Not that Faye could smell any of it. Still, her captain finally threw on his helmet, as did many others as the harvesters rolled out. They were slow and steady, so Faye didn't need to go any faster than walking pace to keep up. The plows moved in parallel with wide front blades that cut through thick piles of corpses and bloodthorn, leaving her a clear blood-soaked path she could stroll through. Like most of the time, their harvest went by uneventfully. The excitement didn't lie in the potential for live monsters to be lingering around, but the fact that they got to walk across the land of death in front of the line. After some time, they stopped their advance and prepared to turn around and return. That's when Faye finally turned back. She lifted her head and gazed at the colossal wall. All across it were metal turret emplacements, too many to count, and all of them teeming with mana. The hardpoint was no different, a massive metal shield sticking out slightly from the wall and filled with its own specialized turrets, defenses, and packed with the administrative command of the entire line. She turned her head to the left and right, seeing the same wall stretching across the landscape and into the horizon until it dipped down with the curve of the world. It was a colossal structure that sent chills down her body every time she looked at it. Despite trudging through paste made of muscle and organs spat out from the harvesters, she almost lamented that this was her last day. She wouldn't get to see the sight again for a while. An image of glory and horror, an impenetrable bulwark of magic and technology, painted with the death of countless thousands. Faye saw the flashes of light in the corner of her eye, turning around to glance at the fires being ignited as they headed back. Alternating every week, they would either burn or bury the remains. When they burned, like now, fire crystals would be planted that consumed themselves gradually with a blaze of fire. When they buried, earth crystals were used to overturn massive portions of the ground and bury the biomass underneath many feet of dirt and sand. It was incredibly wasteful and inefficient, but that's just how much material there was, and they wanted to leave as little for the scourge as possible. It also helped clean up some of the bloodthorn, that hateful carnivorous vine. They finally got back, a blaze left in their trail as they walked through the gates dripping blood. The harvesters moved to deposit their hauls into the train cars, dumping everything for several minutes before the cars closed their hatches and rolled off to another section of the line. Faye sighed and went to decontamination, where they sprayed all the crap off themselves and the harvesters. After getting jetted with water for a few minutes, she got to escape early to go clean up, dodging the job of scraping off the harvester blades. After going through her routine and scrubbing her boots for an hour, the call was sent out to all magisterium students to pack their things and get ready to leave. They had already prepared to do so over the last couple days, so everyone was ready. Today, they would be heading back, and most of them were excited. While it wasn't their last excursion and the others wouldn't be nearly as exciting as this one was, they would still get to take their experience back with them and tell all kinds of stories that nobody else could imagine. Sometime later, all the students were standing in an airfield, their items packed into spatial storages. They remained loosely in formation, Instructor Bria standing by the side, waiting for the man of the hour. He soon arrived, a car rolling to a stop nearby. John stepped out, Faye smiling even as Instructor Bria called them to attention. He walked over, smoking that familiar cigar and looking across all of them. Congratulations, trainees. You've made it through your last excursion here at the Glass Desert. I've seen next to 0 negative evaluations. All of you worked hard, and most importantly, did your jobs properly. Faye listened as he gave his speech. It wasn't anything out of the ordinary, perhaps slightly more sentimental since it was their last time here. Many had looked forward to the excursion being over while they were working, but now that the end had finally come, most found themselves longing for more. Odd how that worked. I wish you all good luck with the rest of your year. A new generation of warfare is coming, but personal strength is just as important. All of you hold talent that will ensure the survival of humanity as a whole. Don't be fodder, is what I'm trying to say, because the scourge has shown you what happens to fodder. Now, your instructor has report cards to give you all, so go line up and grab them. They're yours to keep, containing your evaluations as well as areas to improve. The students followed his command, everyone shuffling over to the instructor as she passed her the pieces of paper. Faye, come say hi. Faye's smile brightened when she was called, turning back to John and striding over. Hi. Hello there. John smiled back, Faye diving in and receiving a tight hug. How's my favorite little soldier in this forsaken wasteland? Doing pretty all right. How's my favorite commander? Tired and overworked. Thankfully, I get paid enough to care. Well, you are the richest man in the world. I would sure hope so. She chuckled, the two separating from their hug. That's when John took something out of his coat, handing it to Faye. She recognized the look of an invitation, her brows raising. What's this? This is my official invitation being extended to you for my wedding. It will be in 10 days. That's soon. Well, timelines change. John shrugged, Faye opening it and seeing the impeccable letter. Penned by a master on pure white parchment and inlaid with actual gold, the invitation was as expensive as it was a work of art. The contents were simple. It was an invite to the wedding of John and Amara Cooper, taking place in the Holy See's Sacred Chapel on December 10th, year 628. Faye's eyes lingered on their names. John and Amara Cooper. She didn't think it would ever be possible, but Amara really was taking John's last name, not that of their noble lineage. It went against every custom they were supposed to uphold. Such a thing would only ever happen if Amara were marrying into a Grand Duke's household or to a prince. It was certainly rebellious. Faye wasn't sure what she thought about it, but she could quickly admit that seeing her sister break away from the chains of political marriages inspired an incredible feeling. Then again, when else would it happen if it wasn't happening with the richest, smartest, and one of the most influential men in the world, who was also as loving as he was ruggedly handsome? Faye held her sigh, looking back at John and smiling widely. Congratulations, John. I never had any doubts that you'd make my sister happy. I did always tell her that she was the lucky one. Uh-huh. Now, Fiden will obviously be at the wedding, right? She changed topics hastily, John giving her a weird smile. Please. If he didn't show up, I'd have his perky ass. Yes, he'll be there. Good, because his perky ass is mine. You know, since he's going to train me in the way of the spear and all. Ah, yes. John chuckled, Faye's face flushing a bit at how bold her words had gotten. Anyway, don't forget that I'm supposed to be meeting him soon. I'd like to see him before the wedding. Of course, of course. I've scheduled you two a time to meet in 2 days. Your mother is coming to my estate to talk wedding plans, and he's going on leave, so I figured it was the perfect time for both of you to stop by and meet since we'll be in the same place. Oh, good. Sounds good. She nodded with a smile, John laughing a bit more before ruffling her hair. All right, kid, my invitation has been delivered. I'll see you at home in a day or so. For now, I get to go talk to some big shots. What big shots? That I can't say. You might see some of them at the wedding, though. Faye hummed with impression while covering her head. After that, the students finished grabbing their evaluations. Faye received hers, and John gave his final speech. Soon they were on a plane headed back to the magisterium, their minds filled with the recent memories of their jobs and the line. And John was on a jet right behind them, his nose pointed to the Holy See. November 30th, 628. I landed in the Holy See's airfield. From there, my transport to the Apostolic Palace was swift. The palace could barely be considered that by the standards of this world. It was made of normal gray stone with few outstanding features. They were going for a humble look, obviously, but it was still incredibly large given its importance and resident population. It was the home of the Pope and his office, as well as the residence for many of the bishops and cardinals of the church. It was a holy place, intruded upon by outsiders extremely seldom. It was also where I was having a meeting with the Pope. This could be considered my first official meeting with the man. Every other time had been among other circumstances, like Amara's crown surgery and my transfer of technology. I wasn't the only one who had been invited. Amara was within the Verga peerage, waiting for my arrival. She didn't want to enter such a place without me there, for multiple reasons, primarily that this meeting concerned both of us, and she didn't want to speak to the Pope unless I was there with her. It was a matter of caution, which had to be held in extremity given who we were seeing. This was also considering that I had learned certain things ever since going to the gateway. Given that I had met the Pope before, and while much less powerful than I was now, there was little to hide that I hadn't already exposed back then. Still, I would reserve everything I could in front of the man. It didn't take me long to link with Amara and head to the Apostolic Palace. We were dropped in the plaza outside the building, and the first sight that caught my eyes besides the building was the amount of robed individuals outside of it. The majority of them wore simple robes, nothing more than white cloth with a few colored designs for identification of position or rank. There were some, though, who wore the robes of bishops or cardinals walking in and out, likely to their services. Their robes were a normal amount of rich, which meant vibrant colors, designs, and inlaid with precious metals, gems, or fibers. These men held high standing, regardless of authority. Such meant little in front of spiritual dedication and faith, or so it was supposed to be. Nobody had any illusions that high-authority individuals were seen as greater than the ordinary, even in the spiritual realm of worship and dedication to God. I could go on for hours about the psychology behind it, but proof was in the pudding, and there was a reason that the Pope was Authority 12, not some beggar on the streets who spent his every waking hour singing praises and prayers. I linked my arm with Amara's, and we walked to the entrance, looking quite outstanding. There were no shortage of eyes that drifted our way. After all, it wasn't every day that outsiders entered the Apostolic Palace. There was a man there waiting for us, a cardinal who I recognized. Not even the Holy See was safe from Sector 4, and I had studied the administration of religious leaders thoroughly before coming here. After all, with an infallible memory, why shouldn't I maximize my repository of knowledge and stuff every name and face into my brain as possible? We were led by the cardinal through a winding maze of hallways and walkways. The palace was massive because just within the Holy See there were hundreds of churches and even more leaders who managed various regions and sectors of religious development. There was not a single room in the place unfilled because all religious leaders wanted to live where the Pope did. What greater form of authority to be in the same place as he, as if it put them on equal grounds. Finally, we arrived at the office of the Pope. There was but a single door, and amongst the others, it stood out only in the fact that the nameplate above the door was outlined in gold. The cardinal knocked for us, and I heard a smooth voice answer, "You may enter." The cardinal pushed open the door, ushering us through before closing it, leaving us alone. I eyed the Pope, who stood in front of his desk with another guest, Halolite. The two watched us as we entered. I could tell Amara was a bit uncomfortable, perhaps not with the fact that we were given audience with such a powerful man, but the fact that I wasn't known for being exceedingly courteous. Where she wanted to bow, I wanted to face eye to eye. Iracle Syagrius. He looked the same as the last time I saw him. Linen clothes with a long sword on his waist and a stature even taller than me at 6 feet 10 inches. We hadn't seen each other in some time, and yet even now I could barely make out his aura. Or, it was more accurate to say that what I sensed was his mere existence, which usually implied some form of aura. His aura itself, I could glean no details about, and when I tried, I could actually feel the Great Barrier pressed down on me. Somehow, someway, it actually got closer as I walked toward him with Amara and stretched out my hand to shake his. He returned it in kind, and that's when I understood that so much as sensing the depths of this man's power demanded that I break down the Great Barrier. Power itself was rejecting my observation of him. How strong he was, I couldn't quite fathom, but my intuition told me that it wasn't as simple as his knighthood being that outstanding. It was something spiritual, the kind I sensed from those girls at the gateway, when their rude gazes tried to glean my life story, just countless times deeper. "Greetings, Sir Cooper, Lady Teleria." "Greetings, Your Holiness." We shook hands, Amara opting for a curtsy, the Pope bowing slightly in response. I turned to Halolite, smiling at her. "Sovereign Halolite, it is good to see you again." "You as well, John." We greeted each other before I stepped back, allowing Amara to do the same. The Pope motioned for us to sit on the couches facing each other. Once we sat down, I faced the man and gave a small smile. I must say, I'm surprised you wanted to see me personally, Your Holiness. I suppose this is about our upcoming marriage. Indeed it is. I've heard that you acquired a reservation for the sacred chapel on the 10th of December. I did. Then I'm sure you also know that the sacred chapel is usually reserved 2 years in advance. I'm thus surprised that you were able to acquire such a convenient reservation for yourself, and in only 48 hours at that. An inconsequential matter. I simply have my ways. The Pope sighed, lifting a few pieces of paper that had been on the table between us in advance. I disagree. How did you convince the previous reservation holder to give up their time slot? You must have been extremely persuasive, considering they've been waiting for 2 years for that very day and time. I gave them an offer they couldn't refuse. Sounds more like a threat. It was my turn to sigh and lean back into the couch. Is there a reason that we're speaking about this? I mean no disrespect, but I find it difficult to believe that the Pope has time to investigate the drama of chapel reservations. I don't, but I do have time to investigate you. After all, you are an important consideration in a growing amount of matters of the Holy See, especially as you start reaching. The Pope dropped the papers on the table. A quick glance told me that they were indeed about not just the reservation I had acquired, but faint reports on my Sector 4 assets within the Holy See. I looked back up at him, already memorizing every word on the pages that I could see. I figured this meeting would be about marriage matters. Can a meeting not have multiple purposes? They can, but conversations about my Sector 4 are best done privately. You imply this isn't a private meeting. Is it because your fiancée is here? Or is it Halolite? I can assure you, she is as concerned with this as I am. But I'm sure you knew that. So if not Halolite, then it makes me curious as to why you don't want your fiancée here talking about these matters. I narrowed my eyes a bit. Now I was a bit pissed off. What I had expected to be a light meeting about my marriage, where I also intended to invite the Pope to officiate the wedding, was turning out to be some kind of shakedown. Was I concerned about Amara hearing about Sector 4 matters? Not necessarily. She had already been directly involved in some of our darkest operations. Still, I didn't appreciate him attempting to use her against me. You must have an important reason that you're playing these games, Pope. I don't bore Amara with every detail of Sector 4 operations because she has better things to do than bog down her mind with the dark details of the world. Those things are mine to handle. These are hardly games, John. You think these are light matters? Yes, I do. I call them games because that's exactly what they are. The politics I engage in and the subterfuge I conduct are both like hobbies of mine. They are hardly my primary focus, and yet you people treat them like there's nothing more important in the world. Just because you're bad at them doesn't mean they aren't still games. Nevertheless, I have concerns about your abuse of power inside my territory. We've protected ourselves from kingdom and scourge influence for far longer than you can imagine, and while I didn't initially intend to, your movements have made me concerned about whether your influence is something to snuff out before it grows. Are you really so naive? I looked at the man with a bit of disbelief. I was sure he truly believed what he said, but that begged the question of why he thought that his territory hadn't already been influenced long before I arrived. Yet he smiled, waving toward Halolite. You call me naive, and yet your fiancé is in a similar position as I. These matters are more extensively handled by Halolite, because you're right, I don't have the time to be investigating these matters myself. I'll hold my opinions on that. My face fell flat as I turned to Halolite. She didn't wear her normal veil and cover, perhaps because of where we were. And while she was blindfolded, her face was impeccable, her skin perfect. I knew she was albino, but she really was quite the specimen. Still, that blindfold reminded me of those girls at the gateway. I had my suspicions. Seeing Halolite again confirmed it. My eyes gazed through her blindfold. I could sense her gaze, could sense some of her thoughts in the way her eyes shifted under her eyelids, and the way she scanned me. Her body language, my memories of our last meeting, the things I knew about her, no matter how little, and what I could surmise and assume about her and what she did. It all painted a picture in my mind. Halolite, the sovereign healer who operated with the Order. One of the most powerful women in the world, and about as naive as I was. We simply stared at each other. I noticed my thoughts flicker with images, a phenomenon I knew wasn't happening exclusively of my own accord, despite my inability to sense any external influences on my mind. Still, I knew how to manipulate the auric sights of others just as I could my own head. What were normally just memories turned to scenes of that which hadn't happened, scenes of possibility and brutal recollection. I stared down Hallowlight and let her see a blended mixture of the truth, as well as what I could and would do. Then I asked, "What do you think you see, Hallowlight?" "I remember those girls at the gateway well. Sisters, I believe you refer to them as. Their training was hardly as complete as yours. One of them vomited at the mere sight of me. They were rude with their gazes. But I now know they weren't the only ones who had been. You're right, they weren't as trained as I was." She leaned forward, resting her chin on her hand as she stared straight at me and smiled widely. "I can see past the menacing barriers that you've raised around your soul. I admire your ability to manipulate your mind. Perhaps that's the path all summoners should take. Nevertheless, despite coming to us in a time when you're forced to grab the reins of humanity's advancement or risk extinction, it's okay to shed this portrayal of viciousness and show others your good side. I feel that your charm suits you more than your visage of terror, as opposed to what the guys at the Order say." My emotions turned conflicted as I felt critically exposed. It was an ugly feeling, knowing that she was seeing things I would prefer remain tucked into the catalogs of my mind. If she was allowed to see glimpses of my spirit, then she could profile me, attempt to break me down, and read what I would do or had done. Those were secrets being exposed. Still, that she saw more than the bad meant that I would at least have someone to vouch for me. My intuition told me that Hallowlight wasn't actually here to interrogate me, but to vet me for the Pope. It seemed that she would be on my side. I let go of some of the tension in my body, noticing that Amara's hand was clenching mine with rather incredible strength. I squeezed her hand back before responding, a bit more relaxed than I was a few seconds ago. "I hardly need my enemies knowing how much of a charmer I am. But I appreciate an evaluation that doesn't disgust you. But of course." Hallowlight suddenly turned to Amara, giving her the same smile she gave me. "You are quite loved, Amara. I'm glad to see that you return it in kind." I glanced down at Amara, noticing her start to flush. The Pope sighed, motioning toward Hallowlight. "All right, Hallow, if we can return to our topic." "Of course." The faint smile on my face faded, but at least the growing hostility had been defused, for now. I looked into the Pope's eyes. "What do you want from me? I assume you brought all this up for a reason." "Well, I'd like you to remove your agents from the Holy See." "Which won't happen. Which is why that's not what I'm asking for. I'll give you my bottom line. Don't interfere with the affairs of my territory. I don't care what you see or discover. Keep your hands off, and go through me if you so desperately feel the need to do something. Maybe even cooperate with us, if you're feeling generous. Do we have an agreement?" I stared at him in silence for a few seconds, his hand raised for a shake. I certainly didn't want to agree, but this was also a concession on his part, and quite the gracious one at that. It could have gone much worse, and defying him here would shift us right onto that course. It at least seemed like he wasn't as naive as I thought he was. So I reached my hand out in kind, shaking his. "We have an agreement." "Very good. Now, as for the issue of the chapel." The Pope brought out another piece of paper from a spatial device, glancing it over. "I have no issues with you using it. You are far from the first to do such a thing, and I could care less about the reservations, especially since you at least compensated the unlucky couple. However, this doesn't solve the issue of whether or not you can get married." I remained silent, letting him elaborate, even though I knew what he was going to say. As much as the kingdom has enjoyed appropriating the term, marriage is a sacrament, and getting married demands that both parties be baptized and have gone through chrismation. As far as I know, neither of you have done that, which means you can't get married in the church. That will change as soon as you do these things. There's no need to worry about me." I responded plainly. I wasn't sure how it translated between worlds, but the religion seemed the same, and I didn't intend to redo processes that I had already gone through years ago. Not simply because I didn't want to, but because I wouldn't replace the sacraments from earth that had been given to me by and with my family. I'm already Catholic, was born and raised that way, and don't intend to redo things. The Pope silently glanced at Hallowlight, who nodded to him after having observed me. There must be some way she was able to verify what I said. I don't know how much she saw, whether she saw things of Earth, but it was clear she knew enough. Perhaps her nod came after verifying something completely unrelated to her ability to see my spirit. I really needed to send people to the gateway. Thankfully, Amara had provided me with the coordinates. Soon, I'd have some eyes there. "And Amara?" The Pope turned to her, her head shaking. I am not baptized, Your Holiness. However, I have already scheduled my baptism. It will be on the 6th, and if necessary, you can contact my sponsor, Vetsman Verga. He's with the order, just days before your marriage. Worry not. I trust that you have your affairs handled, and I certainly trust a member of the order to be a sponsor. Congratulations. Thank you. She smiled widely, a small smile growing on my face, merely to keep up pretenses. She had spoken to me about the baptism, and I had trusted her to arrange things since she didn't want to bother me with it while I was busy. What I had not known was that Vetsman was her sponsor. I wasn't opposed, of course, but I'd be talking with her about this little surprise later. With that, the Pope seemed satisfied. Then I have no objections. So long as the sacraments are fulfilled before the day of your marriage, you two are free to be wed in the holy presence of the Lord. The Pope stood, signifying the end of our discussion. I certainly had nothing more to say at the moment, not before I handled things with Sector 4. We shook hands, holding the grasp for a few seconds as he spoke to me. This meeting may not have been as friendly as I initially wanted it to be, but I congratulate you, John Cooper, on your marriage. May God bless your union. Thank you, Your Holiness. I gave him a small smile, Amara and Halolite giving their goodbyes. Amara also handed Halolite an invitation to the wedding. She took it with a happy smile. I'd be honored. It's been some time since I've been to a wedding, and we're honored to have you. Amara stepped away giddily. She quite liked Halolite, and that would be yet another sovereign at our wedding. With that, the two of us stepped away, leaving the apostolic palace and heading back home. Now our affairs would be all about the wedding and its planning. With the green light from the Pope himself and all requirements settled, there was nothing stopping us now. December 2nd, 628. It looks like a nice place, Faye muttered after stepping off the plane. A short distance away, she could see John's estate, both the main building and its auxiliary buildings and areas. With the weather having cooled significantly over the last month, there was light snow sprinkling down from the overcast above. Faye had on warm and thick clothes, not technically necessary since nights were often immune to the weather and temperature changes, but she enjoyed being warm amidst the cold. Her breath came out in a vapor as she followed her mother. There to meet them was Erhun, John's butler. The man was dressed sharply, but Faye could still barely comprehend him. He was authority 10, capable of becoming a marquis with his own territory and noble family, and yet he chose to serve John. Faye could offer just a smidge of understanding since John was who he was. Erhin bowed a bit to Talexia when she approached, motioning to the car waiting for them. It is our great pleasure to have you, Duchess. John waits within the estate with Lady Amara. Very well. They all boarded the car, getting driven the short distance to the estate and being let out to walk in. Entering through the back door, Faye glanced around at the mild architecture. The estate was built more like a fortress than a household. There was concrete and steel everywhere, as well as thick enchantments riddling the structures. While there were some veneers that attempted to mask the brutalist design, John's paranoia was clear in its influence. It was both a home and a bulwark of protection. Faye hadn't been in the estate before, even if she had heard of it from her mother. She wasn't sure if she would have designed her own estate this way, but it had its own charm, especially considering all the facilities it seemed to have. While not lavish and rich like their own estate, it was definitely functional and probably no less expensive considering how deep the enchantments went. Upon entering the living room, Faye saw John and Amara sitting with some of their friends. She recognized Vetsman and Tana, as well as Fiden, Pontek, Ilinka, and Shadowbang. There were some other faces she wasn't as familiar with. She remembered their names: Aki, Kata, Arya, and Jaya. That girl Kata gave her the creeps. She may be pretty and unique, but something about her aura unsettled Faye. They were all gathered around a table, going over papers with writings and drawings across them. There were samples of flowers and pastries across trays nearby, Tana and Jaya stuffing their faces with some cake as the others sipped on steaming chocolate beverages, dressed in full clothes for warmth. The house was a cozy mixture of coolness and warm circulating air, a few of the girls wrapped in blankets as they cuddled into seats. They all turned when Faye entered with her parents. John and Amara stood, walking over for greetings. After John had shaken Ikor's hand and Amara had hugged her mother, they moved to the table, John bringing up a few papers. We've been going over the menu and decorations. Please, get comfortable. Talexia nodded and took her seat with Icor, Faye settling in by her sister. Talexia commented after everyone was in their places. You all seem to be comfortable. Everyone is on leave, not to return to the front lines until after the wedding. I figured since I was hosting, I may as well make it a warm day in the winter. It certainly is warm. Faye smiled a bit as John started showing Talexia a few pages with design choices. From the layout of the tables across the venue to the arrangement of every item on the tables themselves. There were many details to go through, and almost all of them required personal input. Thankfully, the venue was at least already set. While the marriage ceremony itself would be in the Holy See, the reception would be within John's estate. John had built an entire ballroom and renovated most of the auxiliary estate for this very purpose, making all of it fit for hosting the highest of society. After all, they couldn't possibly invite multiple sovereigns to any old normal mansion. Faye glanced out the window nearby while thinking about it all, watching the snow fall for a moment. Nearby, on a wall of the living space not far from the glass, was a fireplace with burning wood logs, leaving a smoky scent that lingered in the living space. For some time, there were small discussions, some about the wedding planning, most totally off topic. Not everyone had something to do or decide on, but that was hardly an issue. What mattered was that everyone was in one place, in each other's presence. It was a rare occurrence. Faye turned her head, glancing at a corner of the living area. She had noticed the tree when she walked in, but only now that she took a better look did she realize how dressed up it was. Ornaments hanging from branches, magical lights tied to strings and looped around, and dangling strands of thin silver placed occasionally that shone under the lights. There were also some odd pieces of what looked like candy, hooked like a cane and swirling with red and white color. Faye had never seen it before, and she stared long enough to catch John's attention. What do you think? Faye turned to him, smiling and combing back her hair before glancing back at the tree. It looks nice, but what is it? It's a Christmas tree. First one that I've set up in my own home in the last 7 years. This tree was the closest I could find to a conventional evergreen from my memories. I see. Faye stared at the tree a bit longer, John sighing. Yeah, it's not complete though. We need family ornaments to hang. Personal ones for each of us. That includes you. So start thinking of an ornament you'd want. I'm not sure what I should be looking for. This is the first I've even heard of tree ornaments. Well, take a look at mine. John brought up his hand, Psyche blooming and forming into an image. After a couple seconds, it looked like a real object as it fell into his palm. It was a bear, wrapped in a sweater and scarf and riding an undersized snow plow while waving. It looked old and slightly worn, certainly not the prettiest or most ornamental thing. But it was cute, and most importantly, personal. John chuckled a bit. My mother got me this ornament when I was just a baby. It went up on the tree every year, and when I was old enough, I would hang it myself, along with the rest of my family whenever we started putting up Christmas decorations. Everyone had one, and we'd all choose a branch to hang them on. Sometimes we'd fight for who got to hang theirs higher. I see. Faye went quiet, others around them staring at the ornament. It felt like what John was showing them carried a lot more weight than he let on. After all, nobody had ever seen his family before. In all the time they had known him, they had only heard the very occasional mention of them. If that, John kept the illusion active for a few seconds longer before dispersing it. Maybe I'll come up with some, and you can let me know if you like them. Sure, thank you. Of course. Oh, and that reminds me. You and Phaidon follow. John stood, the two standing with him after a moment of confusion and walking out of the living area. They went to the training building, entering the metal room with weapons, gear, and thick enchantments across the walls. Once the door closed, John turned to them, smiling. Phaidon, I've told you about your new assignment. Yes. You'll be training Faye here in the way of the spear. You'll engage with her technique, refine it, and help develop her aura alongside her combat. Every other week, you'll leave the line and return here to train her for that week. During that time, both of you will live within the estate and use its facilities. Faye and Phaidon looked at each other, Faye smiling nervously and bowing a bit. I'll be in your care. Why yes. John, I don't think I'm the best for teaching. Is there a reason you can't get someone from the Wedded City's academy to teach her? Someone with significantly more experience than me? The reason I can't is because I don't want to. Through teaching her, you will also teach yourself. Your goal will be to train her until she can beat you in the basics. I. Phaidon glanced at her a few more times. Fei smiled, turning wry. Something like that would likely never happen. Phaidon may come from a Marquis household and technically be born with lesser talent than her. But Fei also didn't believe that she was capable of walking the path her sister did either. Not only were she and John both on a whole other level, but Phaidon was their close friend, as well as someone from their class. The Calamity class was renowned, and not just because of what happened to them at Purple Sky. Those who hadn't gone insane or catatonic had moved on to become incredible magi. John may be the most famous of them, but he was not the most powerful. Fei had no idea how powerful or talented Phaidon truly was, but that he could stand beside John and Amara in battle meant that he was on a level she couldn't fathom. Attempting to teach her to beat him, even if in just the basics, was an impossible task. Not that impossible was any reason not to try. The point was training, obviously. Still, John's excuse for not finding Fei an instructor from the world's most prestigious knightly academy was rather lackluster. Not that Fei wouldn't take the chance. She wasn't sure what was going through John's head, but she knew her own goals, and he had opened the door for her. She would move forward, as she intended from the beginning when she asked this of him. John suddenly took out a few pieces of paper, slapping them against Phaidon's chest. The man took them, John patting him on the shoulder after the handoff. Here's a guideline for you, friend. I'll leave the rest to you. Hang out in here as long as you two want to flesh out the details. I'll take my leave. John waved and left, Fei waving back with a bright smile. The door closed behind him, Fei turning back to Phaidon as he read the papers. She had never gotten a very good look at him. They hardly ever met in general, but Fei had known that he was good-looking, and another close glance confirmed it. He read the papers with a small scowl on his face, though he seemed resigned to his fate. Still, even that expression on his face was pretty. No wonder John called him a pretty boy. Fei had no way to disagree with that evaluation, and she didn't mind getting lost in his handsome visage. So listen. Phaidon spoke, Fei perking up as he looked at her. I'm not sure how serious John was about this, but I can talk to him and get you in with a real instructor. I've never taught anyone, and I'm still learning things myself. I'm far from being a master. Hell, I'm not even Authority 10 yet. But you're only a level under, and it's not like you won't reach it at some point. I guess. He didn't seem to know how to respond to Fei's praise. She smiled a bit wider, looking into his bright eyes. He seemed to have a generally reserved personality. From what Fei could remember after that fateful day, his girlfriend at the time had been killed during the chaos at Purple Sky. Fei still wasn't sure about the details even to this day, but an attack by the King of Anarchy was bound to kill most. It was a miracle that anybody from the Calamity class had survived. Still, it seemed to hit him hard. Fei could see it in his attitude. Nobody would be the same after an event like that. John and Amara certainly weren't. If Fei had noticed anything from them, though, it was that they had only grown closer. Their love for each other had become ingrained in their souls, and they had been inseparable ever since. Anarchy made them fight for each other, bonded them in a way that made it seem like they were fighting against the whole world together. Fei was curious if Phaidon had the same thing within him. She got closer to him, her shoulder brushing against his as she looked at the papers in his hands. After several seconds, she turned her face up to his, smiling. I think we can give it a shot. You don't really think you could steer me wrong, do you? I won't deny the possibility. My path may not necessarily fit yours. But the basics are basics for a reason. I think your expertise in real combat is more than enough to elevate my own. Fighting King Bloods is a bit different than fighting humans. You should show me. Phaidon's mouth closed, a bit of conflict on his face as he found himself unable to rebut. Fei knew she was technically right. She was still only Authority 4, and he was an entire 5 authorities above her. That was an unfathomable gap, especially considering that, like her sister, they were only roughly 8 years apart in age. Fei couldn't imagine crossing 5 authorities in 8 years. That was a task that would take most others double or triple the time, especially if Phaidon kept advancing. At the rate he was going, he'd be Authority 10 within another year or two, and only just pushing 30 years old while she was in her early 20s. Could she hope to catch up? Absolutely not. Did he have an immense amount to teach her despite not being a master as he so proclaims? The answer was a resounding yes. Phaidon had no way out, especially when it was John telling him. The man hadn't even asked. Finally, he sighed, reading over the papers more. Very well. I don't know what John might have planned for me, but we can do some light training while we're here until the wedding. Did you bring your gear? Always on me. Good. Give me the day to go over these. Tomorrow, we can start with something light, if we have nothing else to attend to. I have a good feeling that we'll be free. Faye grinned, Phaidon smirking in agreement. He put his hand out, Faye taking it. There was no shake, just a light but firm grasp between them. I look forward to working with you, Faye. As do I. Should I call you Master? I'd really prefer you don't. Master Phaidon. Just Phaidon, please. She laughed a bit. Turns out he was easy to tease. She could already tell that this would be fun. That time an American was reincarnated into another world by Spade. Chapter 300, 6 Long Years. December 10th, 628. I slowly woke up as the sun peeked past the edges of the curtains. A long, natural sleep with a week's worth of winding down had me feeling refreshed. My breathing deepened as I came to full wakefulness, Amara stirring just as I did. She had been sleeping longer too, but today, we were about as relaxed as we could be. Of course, the reality of what was occurring today was quick to rouse us. Amara and I looked at each other, her chin lifting so she could look at me from where she rested on my chest. We both smiled, her breathing quickening until she got too excited to keep acting casual. She let out a cute squeal. Ha ha. Today's the day. 6 long years later. She rolled over me, spinning around a few times before straddling me and leaning down to face me from above. She had a wide smile, which I returned. 6 years later. Well, and 4 days. We didn't go on that mission and have our first date until 4 days later anyway. So it can be considered 6 years exactly. All right. When I got wounded by the spiked wolf and lay on your lap in the crawler. Man, those were some fun times. Different times. I know. And 6 years later, here we are. She lowered herself down, lying on top of me and staring into my eyes. 6 years ago, on December 6th of the year 622, at the small base called Nagalev Bastion, Amara had asked me out on a date. Now, 6 years later, we were finally getting married. It truly had felt like an entire lifetime. I could hardly recognize myself, or the world, compared to back then. The two of us had gone through too much together. We had fought for each other, fought for our relationship, managed to secure it against all odds. Not even anarchy capable of ruining us. Our very beings hinged on the success of our relationship. Now we were taking the final step. At this point, it could be considered merely symbolic. There would be few things different after this. However, our marriage was precisely one of those markers for success. It could be considered the marker for success. It was extremely important to both of us that we were married. And mere hours from now, it would be happening. There was only one downside. I smiled at Amara as she started pressing against me, thin clothes doing little to mask the sensations. Careful now. We still have the entire day left. I get more impatient by the minute. But yes, I suppose it must wait. She sighed and rolled off of me, standing as the monitor devices for our room sent off little alarms that people were approaching our door. She muttered under her breath, God forbid we consummate in a building full of sovereigns. That's a great way to get washed without knowing. Thankfully, we have a jet to put some healthy distance between us. We can leave the reception early. Just gotta wait until then. I stood with her, giving her a peck on the lips before we suddenly heard knocks. Amara. Clock is ticking, babe. I heard Jaya's voice, giving Amara a small smack on the rear before letting her go. Time to get ready. I'll see you at the chapel, my lovely bride. As will I, my lovely groom. We shared another kiss before I let her scamper off, the girls taking her to Tana's house where they had all set up camp for preparations. After she was gone, I started getting ready myself. I cleaned up with a long shower and shaved before donning my suit. It had been custom made by Hans Meyer, who had made my other suits. I knew no better couturier, and this suit had demanded both his utmost skill as well as an eye-watering price tag. Amara was going to be wearing a more conventional white dress, but that was only more conventional by this world's standard. As for myself, I had a plethora of options to choose from when designing the suit. I could have dressed in military garb, wearing a dress uniform with my ranks, awards, and plenty of other icons earned from my time in both the kingdom's military as well as Iron Legion. I didn't care to do that though. I wasn't going to wear anything from the kingdom, and I would rather match my bride than wear something tacky that was inspired by Iron Legion. That left standard suit designs, and mine was a more conventional white and black tux. accented with purple to match her eyes, made with the finest fabrics this continent had to offer, and then enchanted a dozen times over for both style as well as preservation. The suit was nothing less than an artistic masterpiece. Flowing purple enchantments that blended with the black fabrics, perfectly conformed to my body, and not a single square inch left without intention. It was an incredible suit by any standard, no matter how basic the color palette was. Just like good beef didn't need elaborate seasoning to be a top-tier steak, my suit found its excellence in quality, not flashy styles or schemes. My suit was on within minutes. I spun a few times in the bathroom, which was outfitted with enough mirrors to see my entire body, and made sure not a fold was out of place. With that, I was ready to get married. Didn't mean everyone else was, though. I stepped out of my bedroom, leaving it behind after activating just about every enchantment inside of it there was. That included the studies. We were going to have sovereigns over, and just like how Amara and I wouldn't be having sex where we could be spied on, I wouldn't leave behind anything that could be taken, no matter how unlikely. Both of our studies had already been cleared of anything with even remote substance. They were just about desolate, and I didn't care what it might look like to others. If a sovereign peeked and saw nothing, then it only proved that I was right not to trust them. If none of them did, then they'd never know the precautions I took, and all would be happy. Still, it'd be some time before I trusted the building again. Who knew if any of them would leave something behind? I'd have to keep an eye on Halolite. She was the one who worried me most, being a warlock. Knights were easy to predict because their arsenal was limited. Warlocks had limits only as great as their imagination and expertise, and all of them had auras I couldn't fathom. No amount of caution was too great. After walking out of my bedroom, I found many of the maids and butlers running around making final preparations. Every inch of the estate was being cleaned to perfection, and supplies were being prepared for this evening. The ballroom was the busiest by far, but no spot would go unattended. Of course, there were more than just my own maids and butlers working. We had brought in triple the staff and a wide variety of chefs. Some of the chefs were famous, having been hired days ago, so that they could prepare well in advance and ensure service was impeccable. With enough money, it was incredible the level of quality one could achieve. Right now, I was the richest man in the world, richer than even sovereigns, and only matched by the king and pope in terms of movable wealth. That's what revolutionary technological advances and monopolies did for a man. And for a week now, I had been wielding all the power that amount of money gave me to make this singular day as special as it could be. Back on Earth, there were entire jobs dedicated to simply managing the moving parts of a wedding. Here, I was doing it all myself, and it was hardly stressful thanks to both money and my greater mind. And Erhan, of course. The man had been working nonstop for days with the rest of the staff. None of the workers nearby greeted me as I walked past, focusing on their tasks as they had been trained. I made my way down to the living area, and once the door opened I could see all of the men getting ready. Most of them were in their suits, or most of their suits. The ones here were Vetsmon, Phaidon, Quan, Song, Pontek, and Blackblood. The others were their own suits, but Vetsmon and Phaidon were my two best men, and they were wearing two custom-made suits that looked similar to mine. It looked like they were chattering when I came in, drinking too, if the flask Blackblood quickly hid was any indication. They all stood when I entered, Vetsmon laughing. The man of the hour. Looking good. Feeling good. We've got the ceremony in 3 hours. We almost ready to leave. Seems like it. Not much to do other than get dressed. It's the ladies who are running around like the world is on fire. I don't dare go near that house. Vetsmon chuckled wryly, the others nodding in agreement. I just shrugged. Well, let's not give them anything to complain about, or they'll have us all by the balls. So, Blackblood, I hear Jaya is your date today. The man choked on his sip of liquor behind me. We all turned to him, which clearly put him on the defensive. Hey, who else was I supposed to take? Being stuck on the front lines leaves little room for mingling, especially when all the Sector 4 agents we work with are helmeted. And it'd be more embarrassing to not have a date at all. Hey man, I'm not judging. To each their own. I'm just surprised she even accepted. What the hell is that supposed to mean? Don't get your panties in a twist. Just don't disappoint me either. I walked to the side as his brain churned, trying to figure out what I was getting at. I stopped behind Phaidon, who sat in a chair already fully dressed. As for you, big boy. My hands came down, slapping his shoulders before my fingers moved to massage around the area. He shivered under my grip. Oh hell no. He tried to get up, only to be shoved back down into the seat. I didn't say you could go anywhere. When the fuck did you get so strong? I heard a little something from the grapevine about your date too. Care to elaborate on why it's not me? Huh? He let out a weird sound, turning around to face me and receiving my stink eye. Don't hummy. You only got 3 hours to tell me how you really feel. Because when I take those vows, that's it, mister. This thing we got going on. No more after that. Wha? What thing? Always playing dumb. Maybe you'll understand what you're losing after I'm gone. I don't know. I stepped away, leaving Fiden sufficiently confused. I checked my aerial, seeing that it was about time for me to leave. All right. Be ready and don't keep everyone who is about to be at the chapel waiting. I need to leave so that there's someone there to greet everyone. Well, we can leave with you. No, you all need to escort your ladies. Except for you, Pontek. Your lady is waiting at the chapel, so you'll follow me. You ask Kata? Blackblood blurted out in surprise, Pontek shrugging. I quite like her. She's a fucking psycho. I think you're just mellow, but keep talking like that. See how far it gets you. Never mind. You're insane too. Blackblood waved him off as Pontek brandished a knife, my steps already taking me to the door. Let's get going. I can't be late. Sure. Pontek followed with large strides, the two of us leaving and taking ourselves to the airfield where we boarded a plane. Erhun was too busy to drive us, so I just drove myself. Pontek and I settled into the plane, soon in the air, and pointed to the Holy See. I'd need to install a teleportation nexus in my estate when I got the chance next. Not like Amara's family wasn't known for doing exactly that, so soon I wouldn't have to fly absolutely everywhere, just most places. The two of us sat across from each other, Pontek staring out the window as I stared at him for a bit. I knew he had something on his mind, despite his best attempts to trick me otherwise. He wasn't yet nuanced enough in the way of mentality to hide from me. Eventually, he finally spoke. I have something to ask about, as awkward as it might seem. Well, I see no reason to make it weird. Shoot. He pondered in silence for a second, eventually facing me. I know we were both in the Calamity class. Maybe we have a neutral relationship since I didn't do anything abhorrently dishonorable during our retreat from Anarchy, balancing out with our rivalry. Still, I'm confused as to why you think I'm high enough on your list to be invited to your wedding. In fact, I wondered the same thing when you accepted me into Sector 4. Back then I justified my approval as you wanting my talent. But this isn't the same thing, obviously. You don't think we're close enough to warrant the invitation. Put simply, yes. I'm wondering why you think we are. Anybody else might think you're telling them off. I smirked, Pontek shrugging and leaning back. You're too smart for such misunderstandings. Indeed I am. Well, let me think. I gave the question a small ponder before responding. You saved our lives during the retreat from Anarchy, when everyone else abandoned us to use us as bait. You were an honorable opponent during the Magisterium tournament. Then after you came to Iron Legion, you proved yourself to be a trustworthy knight for us to fight alongside. I brought you to the Island of Continuance, which continues to be one of my top secrets, and thus far you haven't betrayed my trust. As for any so-called rivalries, I hardly considered them such. Even though I was one of Amara's suitors, you and half the nobility. You were hardly special, but more notably you were one of the few who didn't move on her. It was everyone else who was trying to pit us against each other, all those with special interests in seeing my head on a platter for daring to do what I did. But then you beat me. Pontek concluded, making me nod. Yes, I beat you. I did it fair and square in front of the entire capital and wiped out every collusion against me with brute force. After that was Anarchy, and by then all those things hardly mattered. It was never personal in the first place anyway, for either of us. Which is why I didn't let it get in the way of us developing a relationship. Both of us were too smart and too talented to let the petty politics get in our way. Because we both knew what really mattered. The Scourge. Well, that and personal power. Even wiping out the Scourge comes secondary to cultivating power, because they can't be wiped out without top-end authorities. I don't expect everyone else to be as hellbent as I am on destroying the Scourge. Want it, yes. Expect it, no? But I do care that when the time comes and the Scourge is marching across our lands, there are those who are capable of putting up a fight in the first place. And as far as I'm concerned, any reason that makes someone work for and cultivate their skill and power is a good reason to me. I took out a cigar and pointed at him with it. You have that. I respect you, Pontek. It's why I brought you on. And now, after enough time in Sector 4, I consider us friends. I don't have very many of those for obvious reasons. So sure, I may not be as close with you as I am with those like Fiden and Vetsmon, but at this point it would be weirder for me to not invite you to my wedding. I've fought for life and death beside you at Continuance, and you're an important member of my Desert Eagles. Don't underestimate what that means, and don't underestimate yourself either. Kata might end up losing interest in you if you start losing confidence. I smiled and lit the cigar, Pontek shifting a bit uncomfortably. Was I that obvious? No, she was that obvious. You should be careful, though. She's basically a princess, daughter of the church's most powerful and prestigious General Voldemar, who holds the rank of sovereign despite being a summoner. You have access to her file, so I'm sure you've read it. Her name demands greatness, and her personality, well, I'm sure you know full well how much it demands. Either way, at my wedding, you're not going to be allowed to slouch those shoulders. Her father is going to be there, primarily to meet me, but don't think you're going to be able to escape him. He loves his daughter very much, and he's no less powerful or intelligent than I. We're in extremely similar positions, after all. Pontek sighed as I puffed some smoke, feeling the weight of his decisions bear down on him. It made me chuckle a bit. Next time, don't go for the highest daughter of the land. I didn't actually know who she was at first, and that's awfully hypocritical of you. Hey, it's not like Amara is the king's daughter. But you were still a commoner. At least I'm the son of a marquis. It's proportional. Semantics. Still your fault. And now you get to have a world-renowned master of strategy bore into your soul with the power of a summoner. He groaned again, making me laugh as the jet continued streaking through the sky. Before long, we had landed in the Holy See, and I prepared myself for the next handful of hours. It's good to see you, mother dearest. You're still an hour too early to be calling me that. Talexia reached up so she could hug John, a smile on her face, consequence of the infectious atmosphere of the chapel. It was almost the middle of December, and yet the sun was bright in the sky. The sacred chapel, the most famous and desired landmark for weddings, funerals, and other such occasions, was glistening with polished stone architecture, metal inlays, engraved accents, and beautiful renditions of Christ in stained glass. Every surface was lightly coated by the morning snow that hadn't yet melted, the nearby streets filled with cars carrying all those in attendance of the event. The two separated, Talexia glancing around. She wasn't the only one of high status here, far from it. She could already see Anderson lingering about with other high names of the church. After John had greeted Icor, she asked, "Where's my daughter?" "She's in one of the preparatory rooms, third down that hallway." "Then I will stay out of your way. Can't keep your incredible guests unattended." Just wait until reception." John chuckled, Talexia walking off to find Amara, leaving Icor behind. She quickly found the door, her gaze turning inquisitive when she heard the dense chatter beyond. She knocked, getting a quick response. "No more visitors unless you're the mother of the bride." "I am she." "Oh." The door opened, Talexia seeing Jaya, one of Amara's friends who apparently loved low-cut dresses. It was a bit jarring, the dichotomy between her unbearably cute face and treacherous body. Jaya beamed when she saw Talexia. "Auntie's here. Everyone, shove over. Let the mother through." The chatter hushed noticeably, Talexia stepping in to see a dozen girls all about the room in their dresses and touching on their makeup, Faye among them. Talexia recognized most of them, but didn't care much to glance through them all. At one end of the room, sitting behind a large vanity table, was Amara. The bride met her gaze through the mirror, unable to contain her smile. Talexia silently walked over, stopping behind Amara and brushing her nails through Amara's flowing hair. The white dress she wore was pristine, made from pearlescent fibers. It had lace covering the chest up to the neck and sleeves that went to her wrists, protecting against the cold and enchanted suitably. Talexia was afraid to so much as touch her, as if her mere skin oils would stain the dress's cleanliness. It was such a perfect white, and Amara's hair flowed into it like they were made for each other. It was a masterpiece. Talexia had been slightly worried since she hadn't given any oversight to the creation of the dress. John said that he had someone to handle it, and she had worried that they wouldn't be skilled or dedicated enough to do a job worthy of her daughter. But quite the contrary, Talexia had never seen such fine work done on anything but those dresses made for the king's own daughters, dresses made through projects that lasted upwards of a year. She was relieved, her eyes not able to pick out even the slightest flaw. Everywhere she looked, from the seams to the designs, was flawless, created with purpose and masterful hands. I have no words, my dear. You look wonderful. Thanks, Mom. I've been ready for an hour now, just waiting for the ceremony to start. Have you talked to John? No, we haven't seen each other since we woke up this morning. Next time I see him will be in the aisle. Amara flushed a bit. Talexia smiling, even though she was a bit confused about why they wouldn't see each other beforehand. John was probably busy. He was running the wedding, after all. It was no small event. The chatter around them picked back up a bit. Talexia unable to find anything to ask. There were simply too few doubts about it all. A part of her wanted to think that it was too good to be true, but they already had 6 years to think about it. She certainly had, and she knew both John and Amara had given it many weeks and months of thought. She believed in both of them, which was why she was okay with letting it be out of her hands. She stayed with Amara for a while longer before eventually letting Ikor in. That's also when all the girls evacuated the room to find their seats in the main hall. It was only a half hour to the ceremony. Talexia went to her family, most of whom were from their closest ties among the branches. The ancestors would have her by the throat if she dared to leave them out, and John had said it was okay, so here they were. By now, nobody in the family was capable of saying anything about John. Iron Legion had long been too successful, and John was too rich. And if satisfying their materialistic and political sides wasn't enough, then there was little to say about his character. John had fought tooth and nail to be with Amara, which was saying far more than any other noble boy who had once been her suitor. While she started mingling with her family, she noticed John talking to a few other people. They were Anderson and Luna, Halolite, who seemed to be by herself, and another couple. That couple was General Valdemar Corpella and his wife, a pair of faces Talexia did not expect to see today. She knew about him. Just about everyone worth their salt did. He was a summoner at Authority 10 who was bestowed the rank of sovereign for his deeds in the war against the King of Temptation. He strategized and orchestrated the death of the only king to die in the last several centuries, earning him the Icon of Victory, the highest military honor known, which put his authority and influence near the level of the Pope. So there they were, 3 sovereigns, 3 of the most powerful people in the world. Talexia wasn't sure how the hell John had made such connections. He told her little about what he did, not that she had been pressed to know before. She hadn't even known that Luna was related to Anderson. Based on how she was holding his arm, with rings on their fingers, they had to be married. That was a news flash to her, and its implications made her neck tingle. She wasn't sure what to do, so for the moment, she decided to ignore them, letting John handle his high-profile friends. She'd put them off for now, and hopefully they would disappear before the reception, so she wouldn't have to see them long. There's no way a sovereign would stay to party at a reception, right? John bounced from one group to another. Some of them were Teleria family friends, others were from the black markets, some were from the military. There were a variety of people in attendance, and while most of them were there for the Teleria side, Talexia was relieved to see that John had plenty of friends show, almost enough to match them. The old Tavera patriarch, with his wife, his grandson who currently held the patriarch position, and his wife. Maxwell Alberain, John's mentor and teacher. Plex and Libidus, from Divine Distribution, who John had started out with. The puppet master Benedict Altrud, from the Magisterium, the mentor of the Calamity class as a whole. Chief Ironheart, close ally to the Telerias and ally of Iron Legion. Polina Demirius, John's close friend and strategic confidant, second in command of Sector 4 alongside Jasmine. Vetsmon and Phaidon, both of whom had their parents here. Tana, who had invited her mother and sister, barring her father. Son Sverer, head of Son Industries, partnered with John. And the wall. Talexia noticed John talking to what seemed like the wall at some point, but paid it little mind. The chapel wasn't full. In fact, it was far from it. The pews could hold 5 times the number of people and still be comfortable. The amount in attendance was incredibly small. Talexia had gone to weddings with thousands of people in attendance. More people usually meant higher status, not that it seemed to matter in this place. John was young, so his connections weren't plentiful. Most importantly, his family wasn't here. Talexia felt great sadness at that fact. Either way, there were fewer than 100 people in the chapel. John had said he wanted to make the wedding low profile, attracting little attention. He had certainly achieved that, even though he actually opened it up. He hadn't originally wanted the bulk of the Teleria family to come, but changed his mind later. A small wedding, but no less substantial than any other. Everyone, please take your seats. Telexia's heart thrummed when she heard the announcement, her steps taking her to the back. The time had finally come. Everyone besides those who were to walk down the aisle rushed to sit, most spots already designated. With enough room, nobody was crammed and the sovereigns were able to claim their desolate corners behind everyone so they could look cool and mysterious. Then, the organ started playing. It resonated through the chapel, enough to fill every ear and stir the body, yet not enough to be overwhelming. It invigorated the soul, the sound bouncing off the architecture in a way that amplified the harmonics of the song. Then, the officiant stepped forward, recommended by Vetsmon. His name was Father Jared. He walked with altar servers, veiled in thick robes that covered their faces and body, all except their hands. They took their place at the altar, and John stepped out. Linked with his arm was Telexia. Without his parents, there were few others suitable to be by his side. Since the father was to walk his daughter, the mother was free. John smiled widely as he walked with her, measured steps, taking them down the long aisle. When they arrived at the front, Telexia turned to John, her smile taking on a hint of sadness. "I'm sorry your parents couldn't be here for this, John. I know we're no replacement. Maybe not, but after this, I'll finally have people to call my family." "Indeed you will. I'm proud to be a part of it." She brushed a hair on his forehead back into place before the two hugged. Then Telexia went to her seat. After them were the groomsmen. First was Vetsmon, who walked with Tana. The bridesmaids wore dark purple dresses that matched well with the black tuxes of the groomsmen. The two wore flushed smiles as they took on the gazes, moving to their positions to the sides of the altar, Vetsmon bumping fists with John as he passed. After them was Phaidon, and to the surprise of many, Faye. Phaidon's face was neutral, a small smile tugging at the corner of his mouth. Faye, as opposed, was flushed as she barely held herself together. The two moved to their positions, Shadowbane walking down next with her father, Chief Ironheart. Shadowheart moved to make 3 bridesmaids, as opposed to John's 2 groomsmen. Behind them trailed the flower girl, who had been designated such after she herself nearly begged for it. She was Cata Corpella, and her steps took her skipping across the aisle, white rose petals being flung out of the basket by the handful, her enthusiasm earning a few chuckles. Then, the organ suddenly shifted symphonies. Those who hadn't been completely turned around shifted. Ikor stepped out, Amara linked to his arm, her face veiled by white lace. The two stepped down the aisle, children's eyes glowing at the sight of Amara and her pure dress. John watched the two, an uncontained smile on his face, as they stepped to the altar. He moved to meet them, reaching out to accept Ikor's handshake. "I know no better man, John. I could hardly wait until we could call ourselves family. As could I. I will care for your daughter with my life and more." "I know you will." Their hands squeezed tight before Ikor released Amara, turning to her and giving her a kiss on the forehead. "I'm glad that you can finally be happy, my lovely girl." "I was never unhappy, Dad. I love you all." Amara gave him a hug in response, the man seeming to age a decade in that instant. With a wide smile, he let her go, Amara turning to John and linking arms with him. They moved to the altar to stand in front of the priest with their hands together. And so, the invocation was given. "Brothers and sisters, we are gathered here today for the holy matrimony between John and Amara." He gave his opening. As a heavily religious ceremony, in the heart of the Holy See no less, words of sacrament and holiness were spoken. Unlike what John had often seen on earth, there was no creativity or spontaneity with the process. The process was deeply rooted in many centuries of tradition and sacred practices. After the priest's opening remarks, John and Amara kneeled on plush pillows before each other, and Father Jared underwent the process of Massachusetts speaking the scripture and preparing the attendants for the reception of communion. The ceremony was not just a union, but the joining of 2 souls in the presence of Christ. They had to receive him before they could be joined, and so they did. After the Mass was carried out, John and Amara had been prepared by rite. So they stood once more, and Father Jared gave a few more words before moving to the next step. "Now, we shall hear the vows of the bride and groom. John, are you prepared?" "I am." Father Jared motioned, John squeezing Amara's hands just a bit tighter and speaking smoothly with perfect confidence. Amara Erica Teleria, when I asked you to marry me, I believed I was selfish in my proposal. But perhaps back then, I hadn't truly understood what that selfishness of mine meant. I've spent months thinking about what I would say here, what I would vow to you. And being here, in the presence of those we call family, friend, and ally, I think I finally understand what I need to say. Amara, I will place you above everything and everyone short of our Creator, God Almighty. I will place you above myself, place you above any other being on this planet and any possible material or concept. However, perhaps more importantly, I will place you even above my fight. I think what I hadn't quite understood before was that dedication meant more than just giving you my time or my love, but also my goals and ambitions. To be joined with you means that I am to give you these things that give me purpose. You will become my purpose, the reason I fight, and the reason that I may forsake all else. Nothing of mine will come before you, and nothing I do will happen without you, whether that's physically or spiritually. I think that this way, I'll be able to justify the selfishness of giving you my life and then receiving yours in turn. I love you, Amara, and I want to spend the rest of our lives proving it. The father nodded, turning to Amara and motioning for her to speak. She stood there silently for several seconds before everyone heard a sniffle come from her. John smiled a bit wider, speaking quietly. You okay, love? I am just trying not to ugly cry. I'm kinda glad I have the veil now. Hee hee, take all the time you need. They waited as Amara composed herself. Eventually, her shuddering breaths calmed, and she cleared her throat, finally speaking her vows. John, I think the one consistency throughout these last 6 years of knowing each other is that I've always been trying to match you. I can't count the number of lessons that you've taught me in what it means to be better than I am. As a person, as a soldier, as a partner, you've shown me what it takes to be someone more than who I was. So many chains I didn't know I had, most of which I had put there myself, were broken simply by watching you, learning from you. Now, I don't know if I'll ever be able to match you, but I'm going to spend our entire lives trying. I'm going to spend our entire lives supporting you in everything you do. I've heard that the greatest form of love is not only unconditional, but that which you sacrifice for. So, if you're to give everything to me, then I'm to give everything to you. No matter where we go, no matter what we do, even if the entire world is against us, I will always be at your side, and you will always be able to trust that you have my everything. No matter what happens, always and forever. I love you, John, and I can't wait to tell you every day for the rest of our lives. She finished, Father Jared nodding as the two stared at each other with wide smiles. Now, the declaration. John, if you would. He motioned, John nodding and reaching out. He lifted Amara's veil, barely suppressing a chuckle when he saw a tear streak down one of her cheeks. After that, Father Jared guided John and Amara through their declaration of intent to marry, a special one born from the tradition of the church that was both religiously and legally binding. Once finished, it came time for the rings. Vetsmon and Tana stepped out, handing John and Amara their rings, contained in crystalline containers. John opened his container, took out Amara's ring, and handed the container back to Vetsmon. Amara did the same, and the two turned to each other, rings in hand. Then, Father Jared brought out holy water, which he sprinkled upon the presented rings. He motioned, please, exchange your rings. John went first, Amara presenting her hand and allowing John to slip her ring over her finger. The ring was a masterpiece of both design and enchanting, a translucent crystal shell that twisted around itself, within which was actively flowing liquid gold. It released no discernible magical signature, invisible to the senses, yet brilliant to gaze upon. It slipped over her finger flawlessly, fitting itself just slightly, snug but not constricting. Then Amara placed John's ring on his finger. Yet another masterpiece, yet much more subtle than her own. John's ring was made of pitch-black crystal, within which shimmered blinking stars of white and purple. They both spoke. Receive this ring as a sign of my love and fidelity. In the name of the Father, and of the Son, and of the Holy Spirit. So the rings were on, and Father Jared led them in a final prayer, resounding through the chapel. And so it was announced, by the power of the Lord and declared by the authority of the Holy See and His Holiness the Pope Irakle Syagrius. I now pronounce you husband and wife. You may kiss the bride." Father Jared stepped away, allowing John and Amara to step toward each other, embracing in their first kiss as a married couple. The chapel roared with the sounds of the organ, the windows resonating and announcing to the world the foundation of a new marriage. All those in the pews stood and clapped, the groomsmen and bridesmaids stepping down as John and Amara separated from their long kiss. The five of them lined up on either side of the aisle and were quickly joined by Pontek, Blackblood, Jaya, Kata, Aki, Kwan, Song, Arya, Ilinka, Polly, and Jasmine. With 8 on either side, Vetsmon suddenly called, his voice dominating even the organ. "Present. Arms." All of them drew their weapons, ceremonial long swords on their waists, regardless of whether they were knight, warlock, or summoner. The long swords went up, forming an arch above the aisle as John and Amara stepped down from the altar. A salute, not as friends, but as soldiers. John and Amara paused for a second, staring at the unprompted display. It made John chuckle, but he said nothing and simply walked. The two passed under the swords, and once past, Vetsmon called again. "Order. Arms." The swords went down to be sheathed. With that, everyone started filing out of the pews, John and Amara leaving the chapel. They stopped outside and turned, waiting as everyone exited. Once they were all outside, John spoke up. "Everyone, I thank you all for being at this wedding once again. The cars are here and ready to transport you to the airfield where you'll be flown to my estate for the reception. It will be a quick flight, I promise. The party is only starting, so you all can go ahead and start filing in to be driven. As for those who are stopping here, I'd like to give you all goodbyes, so please come see me to the side." John stepped away, Talexia taking charge of the Teleria family and moving everyone along. The rest moved with her command, everyone moving toward the cars lining the streets and piling in. John met with the ones who weren't interested in going to the reception. He said a quick goodbye to the keymaster, who promptly disappeared with the promise of a gift that was still being prepared. Then there was General Valdemar, who naturally didn't intend to visit the estate to party, even if his daughter was going. Some others were similar. However, John didn't expect that not only would Anderson and Luna be going to the reception, but Howlite would be joining them. He had half expected them to leave, but fate had different plans. He was glad he had already prepared for such a scenario. And so everyone boarded a vehicle, heading to the airfield where a large transport plane was waiting and boarding people as they came. Once the last of them were in, the hatch closed, and they were off to the wedded city, the ballroom of John's estate, promising a night of extravagance.